The diamond hit the porcelain with a sound like breaking glass. Marian's hand was steady as she pushed it across the breakfast table, straight onto Clara's plate, right between the butter knife and the eggs gone cold. "He loves me now," she said. Not loud, not apologetic, just factual. Clara didn't move. Couldn't. The ring sat there, glittering in the morning light like a small, cruel star. Across from her, their father set down his coffee cup. The servants stopped mid-pour. And Julian Mercer, her Julian, the man she'd loved and buried and handed over like a signed deed, stood frozen in the doorway, pale as a ghost. Everything Clara had sacrificed, everything she'd controlled, everything she'd convinced herself was noble, gone. In one sentence. If you want to know how a woman loses everything twice and still refuses to break, stay with me. Comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button. Because what happens next? It's going to hurt. Clara Halston had always believed silence was a form of power. Not the kind that commanded rooms or turned heads. Nothing so obvious. The power she understood was quieter, more deliberate. It was the ability to hold a secret so tightly that it reshaped the world around you without anyone knowing you'd moved a muscle. She'd been doing it for 3 years. 3 years of watching Julian Mercer smile at her sister across dinner tables. 3 years of perfecting the art of not flinching. 3 years of believing that sacrifice, real, gutting sacrifice, was the same thing as love. And now Marian had just blown it all apart with 6 words and a piece of jewelry. "He loves me now." The breakfast room was too bright. That was Clara's first thought, strangely calm considering her entire life had just detonated in front of the marmalade. Spring sunlight poured through the tall windows of Halston House, illuminating the antique silver, the fresh flowers, the carefully pressed linens. Everything looked exactly as it should, perfect, controlled. Except for the ring. It sat on her plate like an accusation. Platinum band, flawless diamond, the kind of ring that spoke of serious money and even more serious intent. Clara stared at it, her fork suspended in midair, and felt the room tilt slightly to the left. Julian's voice cracked. He took a step forward from the doorway, one hand reaching out, then dropping. "Clara, this isn't—" "Sit down, Julian." Edward Halston didn't raise his voice. He never had to. The patriarch of the Halston family wasn't a large man, but he carried authority the way other men carried pocket watches, constantly, unconsciously, as essential as breathing. "Everyone sit." Marian was already sitting. She looked radiant. That was the word for it, actually genuinely radiant, in a way Clara had stopped hoping for years ago. Her younger sister's color was good, her eyes bright, her hands, usually trembling, perfectly still as she reached for her tea. The fragility that had defined Marian since childhood, the delicate constitution that had shaped every family decision for a decade, seemed to have evaporated overnight. Because of Julian. Because Clara had given him to her. "Papa." Marian's voice was soft, but clear. "I know this is unexpected, but Julian and we've grown very close. And I wanted you to hear it from us, from me. Before what?" Clara heard herself ask. Her voice sounded normal. That was remarkable, considering her lungs felt like they'd been scraped hollow. "Before the engagement announcement? Before the wedding invitations? Or before you told me?" Marian's teacup rattled slightly as she set it down. "Clara, you've been so distant, always working on that ridiculous charity project in the countryside. You're never here. How was I supposed to Ridiculous? Girls." Edward's word cut clean through the rising tension. He looked at Clara with those sharp gray eyes that missed nothing, had never missed anything, and she felt something in her chest crumple. He knew. Of course he knew. Edward Halston hadn't built a shipping empire by being blind to the currents around him, but he wasn't going to save her. Julian finally moved, pulling out a chair with shaking hands and sitting down like a man facing execution. He looked awful, drawn, pale, dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. Good. That was petty and small, and Clara felt it anyway, a bright flash of vindictive satisfaction before the grief rolled back in. "Clara." Julian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" She set down her fork with deliberate care. "That my sister is engaged?" Congratulations seem more appropriate than explanation. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. And she did. That was the worst part. She understood exactly how this had happened because she'd made it happen. 3 years ago, when Marion's health had taken another downward turn and the doctors had used words like fragile constitution and nervous disorder and perhaps a stable emotional attachment might help. When their father had looked at Clara with those expectant eyes and she'd known what he wanted without him saying a word. Marion needs something to live for. Marion needs hope. Marion needs... Julian had been Clara's friend first, then more than a friend. Those long conversations in the library, the shared love of poetry neither of them would admit to in public, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, like she was real, like she mattered beyond her usefulness to the Halston name. And Clara had taken that beautiful, fragile thing and systematically destroyed it. She'd stopped meeting him alone, started inviting Marion to every conversation, every walk, every dinner, stepped back inch by inch, watching him grow confused, then hurt, then worse, watching him turn to Marion for the companionship Clara was deliberately withholding, watching her sister bloom under his attention like a flower finding sun. It had worked. Marion's health improved. The trembling stopped. The dark moods lifted. And Julian had learned to love someone else. Clara had told herself it was noble, told herself she was saving her sister's life, told herself that real love meant letting go, meant sacrifice, meant putting family first. She'd been lying. The wedding will be in September, Marion said into the silence. She was looking at their father, not Clara. If that's acceptable, Papa. I thought a garden ceremony, something beautiful, elegant. Clara, you could help plan it. You always had such good taste. The sound that escaped Clara's throat wasn't quite a laugh. You want me to plan your wedding? She said it flatly, watching her sister's face, looking for guilt, for awareness, for any sign that Marion understood what this actually meant. But there was only that strange, bright confidence, the surety of a woman who'd won something without knowing there had been a competition. To Julian. You're Julian? Marion's eyebrows lifted. Clara, he was never yours. You made that abundantly clear, years ago. You pushed him away. Everyone saw it. Marion, Julian started, but Edward held up one hand. Let her speak. Marion's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. You've been so focused on your charity work, Clara. The trust in Ashford, those people. You chose that over everything here. Over family, over... She gestured vaguely at Julian. Over chances, real chances. So yes, I took the chance you didn't want. The servants had vanished at some point. The breakfast room felt enormous and airless at once. Clara could see the gardens through the window. Her mother's roses just beginning to bloom. The stone path where she'd walked with Julian that last autumn before she'd started destroying everything. I see. Clara stood. Her legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Well, congratulations again. I'm sure you'll be very happy. Clara, Julian was on his feet, reaching for her arm. She pulled back so fast he flinched. Don't. We need to talk. Please. Not here. Not like this. But what's left to say? She looked at him properly for the first time since the ring appeared. God, he still looked the same. Same dark eyes, same slightly crooked smile that wasn't smiling now, same way of standing like he was ready to bolt at any second. She'd loved him. She still... No. Clara. Edward's voice was gentle now, dangerous gentle. Sit down. Let's discuss this as a family. A family. Clara tasted the word, found it bitter. Of course. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We discuss, we decide. We determine what's best for everyone. Usually for Marion, always, actually, for Marion. That's not fair, Marion started. Isn't it? Clara turned on her sister and watched her shrink back slightly. Good. Let her see this. Let her see what 3 years of quiet martyrdom looked like when it finally caught fire. When have we ever made a decision that didn't revolve around your health, your feelings, your needs? I gave up university. I gave up London. I gave up... She stopped, breathed, felt her father's eyes on her like weight. You gave up nothing you didn't choose to give, Edward said quietly. No one forced your hand, Clara. And that was true. That was the knife in the ribs. Because he was right. Every choice had been hers. Every sacrifice offered up on the altar of family duty with no one holding a gun to her head. Just expectations. Just love. Just the quiet understanding that good daughters, eldest daughters, responsible daughters, did what needed doing, even when it killed them. You're right, Clara said. Her voice came out steady, strange. No one forced me. I chose this. All of it. And now I'm choosing something else. What does that mean? Marion's confidence was cracking slightly now, uncertainty creeping in. It means congratulations on your engagement. I'll send a gift. Clara moved toward the door, her breakfast untouched, her world on fire. I'm going to Ashford. The trust needs me. The trust can wait, Edward began. No, it can't. There's a board meeting next week about the school expansion. Mrs. Bramwell is expecting me, and unlike here, she paused in the doorway, looked back at her family. Her father, stern and unmovable. Her sister, glittering with stolen happiness. Julian, looking like he might be sick. Unlike here, in Ashford, I actually matter. Clara. Julian's voice broke on her name. She didn't turn around. Be good to her, Julian. That's what you're for, isn't it? Being good to Marion. Making her happy. Fixing her. She gripped the door frame hard enough to hurt. I hope it works out better for you than it did for me. Then she walked. Down the hallway with its portraits of dead Halstons, all of them watching with Edward's same evaluating eyes. Past the morning room where her mother used to sit before the fever took her, before Marion's health became the family's central axis. Through the entrance hall with its black and white marble, out the front door that James, dear, discreet James, somehow had already opened. The air outside was cool, clear. It smelled like roses and cut grass and freedom she hadn't earned yet, but was taking anyway. Clara made it to the garden path before her knees buckled. She caught herself on a stone bench, breathing hard, and that's when it hit her. Not sadness, not grief. Something bigger and more terrible. Relief. She'd been holding herself together for 3 years. Holding everything together. The family peace. Marion's health. Her own devastating secret. And now it was out. Broken. Scattered across the breakfast table like shattered porcelain. And she could finally stop. Miss Clara. She looked up. James stood a respectful distance away, her traveling coat in his hands, her small case already packed. He'd been the Halston butler for 30 years. He'd known her since she was born. And he didn't say, I'm sorry, or are you well, or any of the useless things people said. He just offered her coat and said, the car is ready when you are, miss. Clara stood, took the coat. Let him help her into it like armor. Thank you, James. The Ashford cottage, miss? Yes. He nodded once, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Miss Clara. What you built there. That trust. Those people. They're lucky to have you. Something in her chest cracked wider. Don't, James, please. Of course, miss. He stepped back, professional, proper, but his eyes were kind. Safe travels. The drive to Ashford took 4 hours. Claire spent 3 of them staring out the window, watching the city give way to countryside, the manicured estates dissolving into actual working farms and wild hedgerows. The land got rougher, realer. She watched it all and felt nothing, which was probably better than feeling everything. By the 4th hour, her hands had stopped shaking. The cottage came into view just as the sun started to sink, a small stone building at the edge of Ashford Village, overlooking the valley where the trust did most of its work. It was nothing like Halston House. No marble halls, no servants' quarters, no rooms dedicated to displaying wealth. Just clean lines, good bones, and windows that let in real light. Mrs. Bramwell was waiting on the step, arms crossed, gray bun slightly askew. You're early. I am. Clara stepped out of the car, felt the ground solid under her feet. Trouble at home? You could say that. Mrs. Bramwell looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, the way James had, the way people did when they actually saw you instead of your function. Then she jerked her head toward the cottage door. Tea's on, and I've got the school contracts ready for review. Builders want an answer by Friday. Good. Clara followed her inside into the small kitchen that smelled like bread and wood smoke. Everything here was simple, essential, Real, in a way Halston House had stopped being years ago. Let's work. They worked until midnight. Contracts, budgets, employment records. The trust had started as Clara's escape plan 3 years ago, a way to do something meaningful while her heart was busy dying. But it had grown into something else, something that mattered. 14 women employed, 30 children educated, a community stabilizing around the very real, very unglamorous work of teaching literacy and basic arithmetic to families who'd never had access before. It wasn't sacrifice. It was choice. Clara fell into bed exhausted and slept dreamlessly for the first time in months. She woke to pounding on the door. The sun was barely up. Clara grabbed her robe, stumbled downstairs, and found Julian Mercer on her doorstep, looking like he'd ridden through the night. Probably because he had. His horse was tied to the fence, lathered and exhausted. What the hell? Don't. He pushed past her into the cottage, wild-eyed and desperate. Don't say anything. Just listen. I don't have to. Clara, please. He spun to face her, and she saw it then. Not the confusion of yesterday, not the guilt. Something harder, angrier. 3 years. 3 years you've been avoiding me, pushing me away, and I let you because I thought, I don't know what I thought, that you didn't care, that I'd misread everything. But yesterday, the way you looked when Marion, stop. No. He took a step closer. You loved me. I know you did. So why? Why push me toward Marion? Why destroy? Why give up? Because she needed you. The words exploded out of Clara before she could stop them. Because she was dying, Julian. Maybe not literally, but close enough. And the doctors said a stable attachment might help. And my father looked at me like I could fix it, like I could save her. And I... She stopped, breathed, felt the truth climbing up her throat like bile. I thought I was being noble, she said quietly. I thought I was saving her. But I was just afraid. Afraid of what? Of choosing myself. Clara wrapped her robe tighter, suddenly cold. Of being the daughter who let her sister suffer because she wanted something for once. Of being selfish. Of being the kind of person who doesn't sacrifice. Julian stared at her. So you sacrificed me instead? Yes. Without asking if I wanted to be sacrificed. She hadn't thought of it like that. Hadn't let herself. Julian, Marion loves you. She's happy. Healthier than she's been in years. That has to count for... Does Marion know? His voice was flat now. About us? About what you did? Clara looked away. No. You're going to tell her. No, I'm not. Clara, what good would it do? She turned back to him, feeling something crystallize in her chest. Hard, final. Marion is happy. You're engaged. Telling her the truth now would just hurt her. And for what? So I feel better? So you feel justified? No, I made this choice. I'm living with it. You should too. I don't love her. The words fell between them like stones. Not like I loved you. Then you need to figure that out before September. Clara moved to the door, opened it. But not here. Not with me. That part is done, Julian. I ended it 3 years ago, and I'm not going back. You're running away. No. She met his eyes. I'm choosing something different. There's a distinction. He left. She watched him ride back toward the city, getting smaller and smaller until he vanished into the morning haze. Then she closed the door, leaned against it, and let herself cry. When she was done, she washed her face, dressed, and walked down to the village. The trust office was a converted barn. Nothing fancy, but it worked. Mrs. Bramwell was already there, along with Sarah Wickham, the schoolteacher they'd hired last year, and Thomas Gray, the carpenter overseeing the building expansion. Morning, Mrs. Bramwell said, looking up from a pile of papers. You look terrible. Thank you. Julian Mercer came by? Clara blinked. How did you? Village boy saw him tearing up the road like the devil was chasing him. Figured he was heading here. Mrs. Bramwell's expression didn't change. Want to talk about it? No. Good, because we have bigger problems. She shoved a letter across the desk. Marion Halston is requesting a board meeting, special session, 3 days from now. Clara's blood went cold. What? Says she has concerns about the trust's financial management, wants to review the books, possibly restructure leadership. She's not on the board. No, but your father is, and he's calling the meeting. Mrs. Bramwell's eyes were sharp. What's happening, Clara? Clara picked up the letter, read it twice, felt the ground shift under her feet again. Of course. Of course Marion wouldn't just accept Clara's exit, because Marion, fragile, trembling, supposedly delicate Marion, was also an Edward Halston's daughter. And Halston children didn't lose gracefully. She's coming after the trust, Clara said slowly, to punish me, or control me, or both. Can she do that? Clara thought about the board structure. 5 members, Edward, herself, Mrs. Bramwell, Reverend Michaels, and Lord Ashford, who donated the land. 3 votes to make decisions. Edward controlled 1. If he sided with Marion, yes, she said, she can. Sarah Wickham leaned forward. So what do we do? Clara looked at the contracts on the desk, the school expansion plans, the employment records for 14 women who needed those jobs, the enrollment list for 30 children who deserved better than illiteracy and poverty. 3 years of work. Real work. The only good thing she'd built out of the wreckage of her sacrifice, and Marion wanted to tear it down. We fight, Clara said. Mrs. Bramwell smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Good. About time. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Clara reviewed every contract, every expense, every decision she'd made since founding the trust. She pulled receipts, cross-referenced budgets, built documentation that would survive scrutiny from someone actively looking for failure. Because that's what Marion would be doing, looking for proof that Clara had been wasteful or foolish or negligent, looking for justification to strip away her control and redirect the trust's purpose to something more appropriate, more aligned with Halston family interests. On the morning of the board meeting, Clara dressed carefully. Not armor. She'd learned that lesson. But professional, serious. The kind of outfit that said, I know what I'm doing without screaming it. The meeting was set for Halston House. Of course it was. Marion's territory. Home advantage. Clara arrived exactly on time, walked past James without looking at him, and headed straight for her father's study. The board was already assembled, Edward at the head of the table, imposing as ever. Mrs. Bramwell to his right, arms crossed. Reverend Michaels, nervous and avoiding eye contact. Lord Ashford, ancient and half-deaf but sharp-eyed. And Marion, sitting where Clara usually sat, looking polished and prepared. No Julian, small mercies. Clara, Edward gestured to the only empty chair. Please sit. She sat, folded her hands, waited. Marion didn't waste time. She stood, distributed packets to each board member, and launched into a presentation that was good. Damn her, it was actually good. The Ashford Trust was founded with noble intentions, Marion began, her voice steady. But good intentions aren't enough. Over the past 3 years, we've seen increasing expenditures with limited oversight, concentrated decision-making, and a mission that's drifted from sustainable philanthropy toward, she paused delicately, personal project. Clara's jaw clenched. Marion continued, outlining expenses that looked wasteful without context. The teacher salaries, the building materials, the small loans to struggling families. All of it framed as excessive, poorly planned, emotionally driven. What I'm proposing, Marion said, is simple. Restructure the trust's leadership. Bring in professional management. Realign our mission with proven philanthropic models, universities, hospitals, established institutions where our investment can create lasting legacy. And the people already employed? Clara's voice cut through. The children already enrolled? What happens to them? Marion looked at her. They'll be supported through the transition. But Clara, we have to think bigger than individual cases. Real change requires real resources, properly directed. Real change. Clara stood, slowly. You want to know about real change? Mrs. Wickham, could you read the literacy numbers from last quarter? Sarah Wickham pulled out her records. 30 students enrolled. Average reading level increased 2 grades. 4 students achieved full literacy. 7 families reported increased household income after parents learned to read contracts and market prices. Mr. Gray, Clara continued, employment numbers? Thomas Gray cleared his throat. 14 women employed in various capacities. Classroom maintenance, administration, teaching assistants, all stable income. 3 have saved enough to send their own children to school. Clara turned to Marion. That's what real change looks like. Not theoretical, not legacy. Actual lives actually improving. She pulled out her own documentation. Every pound accounted for, every decision justified, every person named. She placed the pages in front of her father, met his eyes. You want to judge my management? Fine, but judge it on facts, not on whether it makes a good story for the Halston family newsletter. The room went silent. Edward picked up the documentation, read slowly. Mrs. Bramwell watched Marion. Lord Ashford adjusted his hearing aid. Reverend Michaels looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Finally, Edward set down the papers. Marion, he said quietly, these are good numbers. Marion's confidence flickered. Papa, numbers aren't everything. In business? Numbers are the only thing. He looked at Clara. The only thing I see wrong here is communication. You should have been reporting this progress to the full board regularly. Clara stopped. Because he was right. She'd been so focused on doing the work, she'd forgotten to show it. You're right. I should have. But the structure. Marion tried again. The structure is fine. Edward stood, meeting over. Clara maintains leadership. She'll provide quarterly reports going forward. Marion, if you want to contribute to the trust, you're welcome to volunteer. But this vendetta stops now. Vendetta? Marion's voice rose. Papa, this isn't... I'm trying to help. You're trying to hurt your sister because she left breakfast yesterday. Edward's voice was flat. I'm not blind, Marion, and I'm not interested in family drama interfering with actual work. He walked out. The board members filed out after him. Mrs. Bramwell squeezed Clara's shoulder on the way past. Lord Ashford nodded approvingly. Reverend Michaels escaped like a startled rabbit, leaving Clara and Marion alone. They stared at each other across the study, and Clara saw it then. Not triumph, not victory, just her sister, stripped of strategy, looking lost. You manipulated him, Marion said finally. Julian, you pushed him toward me. Why? Clara closed her eyes, opened them. Because I thought I was saving you. I didn't ask to be saved. I know. I'm not made of glass, Clara. I know that too. Now. Clara gathered her papers, her documentation, the proof of 3 years spent building instead of breaking. For what it's worth, Marion, I really do hope you're happy. I hope Julian makes you happy. I hope... Stop. Marion's voice cracked. Stop being noble. Stop sacrificing. Stop. Just stop. I don't want your blessing. I don't want your approval. I want... She stopped, looked away. I wanted you to fight, she said quietly. 3 years ago, when Julian started paying attention to me, I wanted you to fight for him, to tell me to back off, to choose yourself for once instead of choosing me. Clara felt something break open in her chest. But you didn't, Marion continued. You just stepped aside. Like I wasn't even competition, like I wasn't worth fighting, and then you left. Built this whole other life where I don't matter, where I'm just the sick sister you sacrificed for, the burden. Marion, don't. Marion stood, moved toward the door. You won. Today. The trust is yours, the work is yours, and Julian, her voice caught. Julian is still in love with you. He probably always will be. She left. Clara stood alone in her father's study, surrounded by evidence of her competence, her success, her carefully constructed new life, and felt for the first time how much it had cost everyone else. Outside, the sun was setting. She could see the gardens through the window, the roses in full bloom now, the stone path where everything had started to fall apart. And beyond that, the road to Ashford, to the cottage, to the work that mattered, to the life she'd chosen instead of the one she'd destroyed. Clara picked up her documentation and walked out of Halston House. Not running, not sacrificing, just choosing. And somewhere behind her, she imagined she could hear the sound of a diamond ring hitting porcelain, but this time she didn't look back. The cottage felt smaller when Clara returned to it that night, or maybe she'd just grown larger, more solid, more real, taking up space in a way she'd forgotten how to do at Halston House. She dropped her case by the door, hung up her coat, and stood in the middle of the small kitchen trying to remember what normal felt like. Mrs. Bramwell was already there, kettle on, 2 cups set out like she'd known exactly when Clara would arrive. "You won," she said without preamble. "Did I?" Clara sank into a chair. Every muscle ached. "Doesn't feel like winning." "That's because you're thinking about Marion." Mrs. Bramwell poured tea, strong and bitter. "Stop. She made her play. She lost. Move on." "She said Julian's still in love with me." "Is he?" Clara wrapped her hands around the cup, felt the heat seep into her palms. "I don't know, maybe. Does it matter?" "Does it?" "He's engaged to my sister." "That's not an answer." Mrs. Bramwell sat across from her, fixed her with that no-nonsense stare that had probably terrified 3 generations of Ashford children. "You gave him away 3 years ago. You ended it. But if he showed up tomorrow and said he'd broken the engagement, what would you do?" Clara opened her mouth, closed it. The answer should have been simple. It wasn't. "I don't know," she said finally. "And that's the problem. I spent 3 years believing I'd done the right thing. Noble sacrifice. Family duty. But Marion was right. I never even fought. I just handed him over like a piece of furniture and told myself it was love." "Was it?" "It was fear." The words tasted like ash. "I was afraid of being the daughter who chose wrong, who let her sister suffer, who was selfish. So I sacrificed Julian and convinced myself it was heroic." She looked up. "That's not love. That's cowardice, dressed up in pretty clothes." Mrs. Bramwell's expression didn't change. "And now?" "Now I don't know if I even deserve—" Clara stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Julian's getting married. Marion won that much, and I have work to do. The school expansion." "Yes." Clara pulled herself together piece by piece. "The contractors need an answer by Friday. We have the funds. The land is ready. We just need final board approval. And after today, Marion knows exactly where to hit you." Mrs. Bramwell's voice was flat. "She lost the board fight. She won't make that mistake twice." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your sister is an Edward Halston's daughter. She doesn't accept defeat. She recalculates." Mrs. Bramwell stood, walked to the window. Outside, Ashford Village was settling into evening, lanterns lit, smoke rising from chimneys, the kind of quiet that came from honest exhaustion. "She'll come at the trust differently next time. Not through the board, through the work itself." Clara felt cold. "You think she'll sabotage. I think she's hurt and angry and engaged to a man who's in love with her sister. That's a dangerous combination." Mrs. Bramwell turned back. "Watch your back, Clara. Family or not." She left. Clara sat alone in the kitchen, tea going cold, and tried to convince herself Mrs. Bramwell was wrong. She couldn't. The next morning brought rain, cold, persistent, turning the roads to mud and the valley to gray mist. Clara woke early, dressed for field work, and walked down to the construction site where the school expansion was supposed to start next week. Thomas Gray was already there, standing in front of a pile of lumber that looked wrong. Even from a distance, Clara could see it. Wrong dimensions, wrong quality, nothing like what they'd ordered. "Thomas?" He turned, face grim. "We have a problem." The lumber was cheap pine instead of the oak they'd contracted for, half the quantity. And the invoice, Thomas showed her the paperwork, was marked as paid in full. "Someone changed the order," Clara said slowly, "after we'd already approved it. Or someone changed it before delivery and pocketed the difference." Thomas's jaw was tight. "Either way, we can't build with this. It's not up to code. Won't last 2 winters." Clara's mind raced. The contractors were scheduled to start Monday. They had families waiting, children enrolled, a timeline that was already tight. If they delayed to reorder materials, how much to get the right lumber? Thomas did the math quickly. Another 40 pounds, maybe 50, and 3 weeks minimum for delivery. 40 pounds they didn't have in the discretionary budget. 3 weeks that would push construction into autumn, into mud season, into weather that made building nearly impossible. Clara looked at the useless pile of pine and felt something click into place. This wasn't accident. This was precise. "Who approved the change?" she asked. Thomas checked the invoice, went pale. "It's signed by Marion Halston, says she's acting on behalf of the trust board for cost savings." Cost savings. Clara's voice came out flat. Dangerous. She has no authority to approve purchases. The supplier wouldn't know that. Halston name on the invoice? They'd assume it was legitimate. Clara turned, looked back toward the village, toward the cottage, toward the careful, quiet work she'd built over 3 years, and saw it clearly now, how easy it would be to destroy. A changed order here, a delayed payment there, small sabotages that looked like efficiency measures or honest mistakes, death by 1,000 cuts, all bearing Marion's helpful, concerned signature. "Get me the supplier's information," Clara said. "I'm going to London." "Clara!" "Now, Thomas." The train to London left at noon. Clara made it with 5 minutes to spare, climbed into a second-class carriage, and spent the 2-hour journey building a strategy. Not a careful one, not a diplomatic one, something sharper. She'd tried sacrifice. She'd tried stepping aside. She'd tried being the good daughter who fixed things quietly. Marion had just declared war. Time to fight back. The lumber supplier was in Whitechapel, a narrow shopfront squeezed between a butcher and a textile warehouse. The owner, a Mr. Pritchard, round and nervous, took one look at Clara's face and started sweating. "Miss Halston, I assure you the order was processed exactly as specified, by someone with no authority to specify anything." Clara placed the invoice on his desk. "Marion Halston is not a trustee. She has no power to approve purchases. This order was fraudulent." Pritchard's face went from red to white. We had no way of knowing. The Halston name is not a blank check." Clara leaned forward. "You delivered inferior materials, charged for premium ones, and took payment on a fraudulent order. That's breach of contract at minimum, possibly fraud." "Miss Halston, please, here's what's going to happen." Clara's voice was ice. "You're going to deliver the oak we actually ordered, full quantity, no charge, and you're going to do it within 1 week." "A week? That's impossible." "Then make it possible. Or I take this invoice to every builder in London and explain how Pritchard Lumber conducts business." She straightened. "Your choice." Pritchard wilted. 1 week, the oak, no charge. "Good." Clara turned to leave, then paused. "And if Marion Halston contacts you again, you refer her to me, directly. Understood?" "Yes, miss." Clara walked out feeling something dark and fierce burning in her chest. Not satisfaction, something hungrier. She'd spent 3 years being careful, being measured, being the responsible one who sacrificed and stepped aside. Marion had just reminded her why that never worked. The Halston townhouse in London was in Belgravia, elegant, expensive, mostly empty since Edward preferred the country estate. But Marion was there. Clara knew because she'd seen her sister's engagement announcement in the morning paper, complete with details about the upcoming season and the Mercer Halston wedding preparations being coordinated from the family's London residence. Clara arrived at 6 o'clock. Didn't knock. Used her key, she was still family, technically, and walked straight into the drawing room where Marion was having tea with 3 other young women, all of them dressed in the kind of expensive simplicity that screamed old money. "Clara." Marion's cup rattled slightly as she set it down. "I didn't know you were in London." "Clearly." Clara nodded politely at the other women. "Ladies, do you mind? I need to speak with my sister. Privately." They fled, practically tripped over themselves getting out. Marion watched them go, then turned back to Clara with something dangerous in her eyes. "That was rude." "So was sabotaging my lumber order." Clara closed the drawing room door, locked it. "Want to explain why you're forging trust documents?" "I'm not forging. You approved a purchase you had no authority to approve. You changed an order that was already contracted, and you pocketed, or someone pocketed, the difference between what we paid and what was delivered." Clara pulled out the invoice. "That's fraud, Marion. Actual fraud." Marion's face went carefully blank. "I was trying to help. The trust is spending too much on construction. I found a cost-saving measure by ordering materials that won't last 2 years, by delaying construction 3 weeks, by undermining the one thing I've built that actually matters." Clara's voice rose despite herself. "Is this about Julian? About the trust? Or are you just trying to hurt me because I left breakfast?" "You left everything!" Marion shot to her feet. "You walked out, abandoned the family, abandoned—" Her voice cracked. "You made your choice, Clara. You chose that village over us, over me. So yes, Maybe I wanted to remind you that choices have consequences. Consequences? Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. You want to talk about consequences? Fine. The consequence of what you just did is that 30 children don't get a school. 14 women lose their jobs when construction delays force budget cuts. An entire community suffers because you wanted revenge. That's not... I didn't mean... Didn't you? Clara stepped closer. You presented that board motion knowing it would hurt the work. You sabotaged the lumber order knowing it would cause delays. What exactly did you think would happen? Marion's hands were shaking now, the old trembling, the fragility that had defined her for years. But Clara didn't soften. Couldn't. Not this time. I wanted you to come back, Marion said quietly. To fight, to care about us as much as you care about them. I do care. About you, about Father, about... Clara stopped. But I can't come back, Marion. That version of me, the one who sacrificed and stepped aside and managed everyone's happiness? She's gone. What you're engaged to Julian cost me. What giving him to you cost me. And I won't do that again. Then what do we do? Marion's voice broke. Because I don't know how to be your sister anymore. I don't know how to... She pressed her hands to her face. Julian looks at me and I know he's thinking of you. Father looks at me like I'm the problem child again. And you look at me like I'm the enemy. You sabotaged my work. I know. Marion lowered her hands. Her eyes were red but dry. I know, and I should apologize. I should make it right. But Clara, I don't know how. Clara felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. Start by staying out of trust business, she said. No more helpful suggestions. No more cost-saving measures. If you want to be involved, actually volunteer. Show up. Do the work. But no more sabotage. And Julian? What about Julian? Are you going to... Marion stopped. Started again. Do you still love him? The question hung between them like smoke. Clara thought about lying, about being kind, about sacrificing one more time. She didn't. I don't know, she said honestly. I loved who we were 3 years ago, but that's gone. We're different people now. And even if he broke the engagement, even if he chose me, I don't know if I could trust it. Trust him, trust myself not to just give him away again the next time someone needs saving. Marion nodded slowly. That's fair? Is it? It's honest. That's rarer. Marion walked to the window, looked out at the London street going dark. I do love him, you know. Julian. It started as, I don't know, gratitude maybe, friendship, but it grew into something real, at least for me. Does he know? About us? About what I did? I told him. Marion's reflection in the glass was ghostly. After the board meeting, after he came back from Ashford looking like he'd seen a ghost, I told him everything, that you'd pushed him toward me, that I'd known, or at least suspected, that the whole thing was built on your sacrifice. Clara's stomach dropped. What did he say? He didn't. Marion turned around. He just left. Haven't seen him since. The engagement stands technically, but I don't know if there's going to be a wedding. The room felt too small suddenly. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, loud and irregular. I should go, she managed. Clara, I have a train to catch. Ashford. The work. She unlocked the door, yanked it open. Fix the lumber situation, make it right, and Marion, stay away from my trust. She made it to the street before her knees went weak, leaned against a lamppost, breathing hard, trying to process what Marion had just told her. Julian knew everything, and he'd disappeared. Which meant what? That he was done with both of them? That he was processing? That he was making a choice? Clara didn't know. Didn't want to know. Wanted to get back on the train, back to Ashford, back to work she could control and problems she could solve with documentation and determination. But she'd barely made it 2 steps when she saw him. Julian, standing across the street, under another lamppost, watching her like he'd been waiting, like he'd known she'd be here. They stared at each other across the evening traffic, and Clara felt the world narrow to just this. Him, her, the space between them that used to be love and was now just wreckage. He crossed the street, slowly, deliberately. Marion told you, Clara said when he reached her. Not a question, She told me. His voice was rough. Everything. The manipulation, the sacrifice, the noble martyrdom. He stepped closer. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? No. Why? Because it wouldn't have changed anything. You'd still be engaged. She'd still love you. And I'd still be... Clara stopped. It didn't matter. It mattered to me. Julian's hands clenched. I spent 3 years thinking I'd misread everything, that you'd never cared, that I was just convenient until I wasn't. And all that time you were... What, Clara? Playing puppeteer, deciding my life for me? I was trying to save my sister. I'm not a cure. The words exploded out of him. I'm not medicine or treatment or some stabilizing force you can prescribe. I'm a person. I had feelings. I had... His voice cracked. I loved you. Actually loved you. And you just gave me away like I was nothing. You weren't nothing. Then why? He grabbed her shoulders, not hard but desperate. Why give up on us? Why not fight? Why not tell me what was happening so we could figure it out together? Clara pulled back. Because I was afraid. Because everyone expected me to fix Marion, to put family first, to be the good daughter who sacrificed. And I... She pressed her hands to her face. I didn't know how to choose myself. I still don't. Then learn. What? Learn. Julian's eyes were fierce. Figure it out. Because Clara, I broke the engagement this afternoon. Told Marion the truth, that I can't marry her while I'm still in love with you, that it wouldn't be fair to either of us. Clara's world tilted. You... what? I ended it. He ran a hand through his hair, looking wrecked. And before you panic about Marion's health, or your father's disappointment, or whatever noble excuse you're building, know this. She took it better than I expected. Said she'd been waiting for it, actually. Said she deserved someone who looked at her the way I look at you. How do you look at me? Like you're the only real thing in a world full of performances. He stepped closer. Like you matter. Like you're worth fighting for even when you won't fight for yourself. Clara felt tears burning. Julian, I can't. You can. His hands found hers. You just have to choose, not sacrifice, not step aside. Actually choose. Me or not me. Your life or the life everyone expects. But make the choice yourself, Clara. For yourself. And if I choose wrong, then we'll deal with it. Together. He squeezed her hands. But you have to choose. The street around them was moving. Carriages, pedestrians, the whole London evening carrying on oblivious. Clara stood in the middle of it, holding Julian's hands, and felt the weight of 3 years pressing down. She'd sacrificed him once, given him away, convinced herself it was love. Now he was offering himself back. No martyrdom, no noble gesture, just choice. Real, terrifying choice. I need time, she heard herself say, to think, to figure out who I am without the sacrifice, without the fear. Julian's face fell, but he nodded. How much time? I don't know. Weeks? Maybe months. However long it takes to... She stopped. I'm going back to Ashford. To the work. To building something that's mine. And I need to do it without managing your feelings or Marion's health or anyone's expectations. Just me. Alone. Alone. Yes. He let go of her hand slowly. And then I'll know. Clara stepped back. If I want this, want you, want us. But I have to figure it out myself, Julian, without you waiting, without the pressure. So this is goodbye. This is, Clara struggled for the word. Space, real space. Not me running, not you chasing, just both of us figuring out who we are separately, so maybe we can be something together, if that's what we choose. Julian looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay, I've waited 3 years. I can wait longer. He smiled, sad and real. But Clara, when you figure it out, come find me. Don't send a letter. Don't ask Marion to tell me. Come find me yourself and tell me what you've chosen. I will. He left, walked away into the London evening, shoulders set, not looking back. Clara watched him go and felt something break open in her chest. Not grief, not loss, freedom. She just turned down Julian Mercer, the man she loved, the man who'd just ended his engagement for her, turned him down and asked for space, and refused to take the easy path of falling back into old patterns. It hurt, worse than she'd expected, but it also felt right. Clara turned and walked the other direction, toward the train station, toward Ashford, toward work that mattered and a life she was building brick by brick without anyone's permission. She made the last train with minutes to spare, collapsed into a seat, and only then let herself cry. Not pretty tears, not quiet ones. The kind of crying that came from pressure released, from decisions made, from choosing the hard thing over the easy lie. The woman across from her offered a handkerchief. Clara took it, grateful. "Man trouble?" the woman asked kindly. Clara laughed through the tears. "Life trouble. Isn't that always the way?" The woman settled back. "But you're crying on a train leaving London, not staying in it, so you made your choice." "I did." "Good choice?" "I don't know yet." Clara wiped her face. "But it's mine." The woman smiled. "That's the only kind worth making, dear." The train pulled into Ashford Station just after midnight. Mrs. Bramwell was waiting on the platform with a lantern, because of course she was. "You look terrible," she said. "I feel terrible." Clara climbed down, legs shaky. "But I fixed the lumber situation. Full order. 1 week, no charge." "Good." Mrs. Bramwell handed her the lantern. "And Julian Mercer? How did you—" "Marian sent a telegram. Said the engagement is off. Said her sister is an idiot." Mrs. Bramwell's expression didn't change. "I agreed with the second part." Clara started walking toward the cottage. "I turned him down." "I know. He loves me. He ended things with Marian, and I turned him down." "Why?" "Because—" Clara stopped in the middle of the dark road. "Because I don't know how to love him without sacrificing myself, without managing everyone's happiness, and I need to learn who I am before I can be with someone else." Mrs. Bramwell nodded slowly. "That's the first smart thing you've said since I met you." "Really?" "Really." They walked in silence for a moment. "The contractors start Monday. School expansion, full schedule. We'll need all hands." "I'll be there." "Good." Mrs. Bramwell stopped at the fork where their paths diverged. "Clara, about Marian, the sabotage. Are you going to—" "She's going to fix it," Clara said. "Make it right. And then we're going to figure out how to be sisters without one of us sacrificing for the other." "Think that's possible?" "I don't know, but I'm tired of not trying." Mrs. Bramwell smiled, a real smile this time, not the sharp battlefield version. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we build." Clara walked the last quarter mile to the cottage alone. The valley spread out below her, dark and quiet, punctuated by scattered lights from the village. Her village now. Her work. Her choice. Inside, the cottage was cold. She lit the fire, made tea she wouldn't drink, and sat at the table looking at the construction plans for the school. Somewhere in London, Julian was processing. Marian was mourning an engagement that had been doomed from the start. Her father was probably calculating how this would affect the family reputation. And Clara? Clara was here, building something real, learning how to choose without sacrificing, figuring out who she was when she stopped managing everyone else's life. It was terrifying. It was perfect. She fell asleep at the table, head on the construction plans, and dreamed of foundations being laid. The sound of hammering woke her. Clara lifted her head from the construction plans, neck screaming in protest, and squinted through the cottage window at dawn breaking over Ashford Valley. Monday. The contractors had started early. She stumbled outside, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and found Thomas Gray directing a crew of 8 men as they unloaded lumber from 2 massive wagons. The oak. Actually oak this time, golden and solid in the early light. "Pritchard came through," Thomas called when he saw her. "Delivered yesterday evening, premium grade, full order." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. One problem solved. One small victory in a war that was just beginning. Good. Let's get started. The next 2 weeks disappeared into work. Real work. The kind that left splinters under your nails and sawdust in your hair and muscles, burning from carrying beams and holding levels and doing 100 small tasks that added up to something bigger. Clara worked alongside the construction crew, ignoring Thomas's protest that she was paying them to do this. "I need to understand it," she told him. "Every joint, every measurement. If I'm asking the trust to fund it, I'm going to know exactly what we're building." Sarah Wickham thought she was insane. "You're exhausting yourself." "I'm learning." Clara hammered another nail, felt it sink true. "There's a difference." But Sarah was right. By the end of the first week, Clara was running on 4 hours of sleep and stubborn determination. The school's foundation was laid, walls beginning to rise, and she could see it now, the shape of something permanent, something that would outlast her mistakes. Mrs. Bramwell watched from a distance, arms crossed, saying nothing, which meant she was thinking plenty. On Friday evening, as the crew packed up for the weekend, a rider appeared on the valley road. Clara recognized the Halston livery before she saw the man's face. James. Her stomach dropped. James dismounted, handed her an envelope without meeting her eyes. "From your father, miss. He said it's urgent." Clara broke the seal, read the single page inside, and felt the ground shift. Edward Halston requests Clara Halston's presence at an emergency board meeting of the Ashford Trust. Saturday, 10 a.m., Halston House. Attendance is mandatory. Failure to appear will be considered abandonment of fiduciary duty. "When did he send this?" Clara's voice came out flat. "This morning, miss." "Tomorrow." He was giving her less than 24 hours' notice, and using legal language, fiduciary duty, abandonment, that suggested this wasn't a request. "Did he say what the meeting is about?" James hesitated. "Miss Marion has filed a formal complaint, miss, with the board, about misuse of trust funds." The world went very quiet. "Misuse? That's what I heard, miss. I'm sorry." Clara read the letter again, looking for something she'd missed. Found nothing but her father's signature, heavy and final. "Tell him I'll be there." James nodded, climbed back on his horse, and rode away. Clara stood holding the letter as the sun set over the half-built school and felt fury rising like bile. Marion had promised to fix the lumber situation, to make it right. Instead, she'd escalated, filed formal complaints, turned their private war into public record. "What's wrong?" Thomas had appeared beside her, saw her face. "Clara?" She handed him the letter, watched him read it, watched his expression darken. "Misuse of funds, she can't prove that. Everything's documented, every expense justified." "She doesn't need to prove it," Clara said slowly. "She just needs to create doubt. Make the board question my judgment. And she has the Halston name behind her, my father's support." "Your father signed this?" "He called the meeting." Clara took the letter back, folded it carefully. "Which means Marion got to him. Convinced him I'm being reckless or wasteful or—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter. I have to go. I have to defend the work." "Want me to come? As witness to the expenses?" Clara thought about it, about walking into Halston House with Thomas beside her, armed with receipts and documentation. It was tempting, safe. "No," she said. "This is family business. I need to handle it myself." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She went through every expense record, every contract, every decision made in 3 years of running the trust. Built a defense so airtight, even Marion's malice couldn't crack it. But underneath the preparation, something else was building, something darker and more dangerous than anger. Understanding. Marion wasn't going to stop. No matter how many board meetings Clara won, no matter how good the work was, Marion would keep finding ways to attack. Because this wasn't about the trust. It was about Julian, about Clara leaving, about Marion finally having power and using it the only way she knew how, by destroying what Clara loved. Clara arrived at Halston House at 9:30, early enough to claim territory. James let her in with that same careful neutrality, and she walked straight to her father's study without waiting to be announced. Edward was already there. So was Marion, looking polished and prepared. And sitting across from them, looking deeply uncomfortable, was Reverend Michaels. No Mrs. Bramwell, no Lord Ashford. "Where's the rest of the board?" Clara asked. "Lord Ashford is in Bath," Edward said. "Mrs. Bramwell declined to attend." "Declined?" She said. Edward consulted a telegram. "I don't participate in family vendettas disguised as governance." Her words. Clara felt a flash of gratitude quickly buried under calculation. 3 board members present. Her father, Marion's ally. Reverend Michaels, who'd vote whichever way the wind blew. And herself. This wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. Let's begin. Edward gestured to a chair. Clara sat, back straight, hands folded over her documentation. Marion has raised concerns about trust expenditures, specifically unauthorized expenses and potential financial mismanagement. What unauthorized expenses? Clara kept her voice level. Every pound spent has been approved and documented. Marion slid a folder across the desk. These. Clara opened it, found highlighted entries from the trust ledger. Small things. A payment to a local widow for cleaning services. A discretionary fund for emergency family assistance. A modest salary for Sarah Wickham that was slightly above the original contracted amount. These are all legitimate expenses, Clara said. The widow cleaning is Mrs. Pettigrew. She lost her husband last year and needed work. The emergency fund has helped 4 families avoid eviction, and Sarah's salary increase was performance-based after she took on additional students. None of which were approved by the board, Marion said quietly. You made these decisions unilaterally, because they were within my authority as trust director. Small operational decisions that didn't require full board approval. Where does it say that? Marion's eyes were sharp. In the trust charter? Because I've read it, Clara. Every operational expense over £10 requires board notification at minimum. These payments, she tapped the folder, total £63, unreported, unapproved. Clara felt ice in her veins. Marion had done her homework, found the technicality Clara had overlooked in 3 years of just doing the work. I should have reported them, Clara admitted. You're right, but the work itself was necessary, beneficial. These aren't misused funds, they're just imperfectly documented. Imperfectly documented funds look identical to embezzled ones, Marion said, from a governance perspective. Embezzled? Clara's voice rose despite herself. You're accusing me of stealing from the trust? I'm saying the documentation is insufficient, the oversight is lacking, and the board has a responsibility to ensure proper management. Marion looked at their father. Papa? Edward had been silent through the exchange, watching both daughters with those calculating gray eyes. Now he spoke. Clara, these concerns are legitimate. Regardless of intent, you've failed to follow proper procedure. That creates liability for the entire board. So what are you proposing? That I report every expense over £10? Fine, I'll implement that immediately. That's not enough, Marion said. The trust needs proper oversight, professional management, someone who understands fiduciary responsibility. Clara's blood went cold. You want to replace me? I want to protect the trust's mission and its beneficiaries, Marion said, and there was something in her voice, something almost genuine beneath the attack. Clara, you've done good work, real work, but you're overstretched, emotional, making decisions from passion instead of strategy. Passion built that school, and poor documentation nearly destroyed it. Marion leaned forward. What happens when you miss something bigger? When a contractor overcharges and you don't catch it? When someone takes advantage of your goodness and drains the trust dry? That won't happen. How do you know? Marion's voice cracked slightly. How can you be sure when you're barely sleeping, working construction sites, managing everything yourself because you won't ask for help? And there it was. Beneath the attack, beneath the governance language, Marion was worried. Actually worried. Clara felt something shift. You think I'm going to break? She said slowly. Like you did. That I'm taking on too much and it's going to destroy me. Marion looked away. I think you don't know how to stop, how to delegate, how to trust anyone else to care as much as you do. Because the last time I trusted someone else to care, she sabotaged a lumber order. The room went silent. Reverend Michaels looked like he wanted to dissolve into the chair. Edward's expression hardened. Marion went very pale. That was a mistake, Marion said finally. I told you I'd fix it. I did fix it. After I went to London and threatened legal action against the supplier. After I spent 2 weeks making up for your sabotage. Clara stood. You want to talk about trust, Marion? About oversight? You've actively tried to destroy this work twice now. And you expect me to believe this, she gestured at the folder, is about protecting the trust? It's about protecting you. Marion was on her feet too. From yourself. from burning out trying to prove you don't need anyone, from sacrificing yourself all over again, except this time for strangers instead of family. They're not strangers. They're not your responsibility. Marion's voice broke. 30 children, 14 women, an entire village. You're trying to save all of them because you couldn't save me, because you gave up Julian to fix me and it didn't work, and now you're trying to fix everything else to make up for it. Clara felt like she'd been slapped. That's not, isn't it? Marion's eyes were red. You think I don't see it? The way you work yourself to exhaustion? The way you refuse help? You're still sacrificing, Clara. You've just changed who you're sacrificing for. Edward cleared his throat. Girls, no. Clara's voice came out sharp. Marion wants to do this? Fine. Let's do this. She turned to her sister. You're right. I am trying to fix things, build things, create something good out of the mess we made. But that's not sacrifice, that's choice. I chose this work. I chose Ashford. And yes, I'm tired and overstretched and probably making mistakes. But they're my mistakes, my choices. Not noble martyrdom, just me, actually trying to live a life that matters. By pushing everyone away, by learning to stand alone. Clara's hands were shaking. You want to know why I turned down Julian? Why I asked for space? Because I don't know how to be with someone without managing their happiness, without sacrificing myself to keep them whole. I did it to you for years. I was doing it to him. And I'm trying. I'm trying to learn how to just be Clara, flawed, imperfect, not responsible for everyone's well-being. Marion wiped her eyes roughly. So what? You replace family with charity work? Trade one form of sacrifice for another? I replace obligation with choice. Clara sat back down, suddenly exhausted. There's a difference, even if I haven't figured it out perfectly yet. The room settled into uncomfortable silence. Reverend Michaels looked at his shoes, Edward looked at his daughters, and Marion looked at Clara with something that might have been understanding. The documentation issues are still real, Edward said finally, regardless of motivation. I know. Clara pulled out her own folder. Which is why I've spent the last 2 weeks implementing new procedures. Monthly expense reports, quarterly audits, clear approval thresholds, it's all here. She slid the folder across the desk. Edward read through it slowly, methodically. This is thorough, he admitted, because Marion was right about one thing. The trust needs better oversight. Not different leadership, just better systems. Clara looked at her sister. If you actually want to help Marion, help with that. Review the reports, ask questions, hold me accountable, but stop trying to destroy what I'm building just because you're angry I left. Marion's jaw tightened. And Julian? Is none of your business anymore. You ended the engagement, remember? You pushed him to end it. I asked for space to figure out my own life, that's all. Clara's voice softened slightly. Marion, I don't know if Julian and I have a future. I don't know if I'm capable of being with someone without sacrificing myself into nothing, but I'm trying to find out, and that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. Marion's voice was raw. He loved you the whole time we were together. I was just the substitute, the second choice. Then you deserve better than that, Clara said. You deserve someone who chooses you first, who loves you for you, not because I pushed him your way. Marion looked at their father. Papa? Edward had been reading through Clara's new procedures. Now he set them down and looked at both daughters with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. The documentation improvements are acceptable, he said. Clara will implement them immediately. Monthly reports to the full board, no exceptions. And my concerns about management, Marion pressed, are noted, but not sufficient to justify leadership change. Edward stood. Clara built this trust from nothing. She's made mistakes. She'll make more. But the work is sound, and the mission is clear. Unless there's evidence of actual financial malfeasance, not just poor paperwork, she remains director. Marion's face crumpled. So I just lose. Again. No one's losing, Edward said, but his voice was tired. This isn't a competition, Marion. Isn't it? She looked between her father and sister. Clara gets the trust. Julian. Even your approval for standing up to family. What do I get? The question hung in the air, sharp and painful. A chance to build your own life, Clara said quietly. Without being the sick sister everyone sacrifices for. Without being defined by what you need from others. Just Marion, figuring out who she is. I don't know who that is. Neither do I. About myself, I mean. Clara stood, gathered her folders. But I'm trying to find out. Maybe you should too. She left before Marion could respond. Walked out of the study, through the entrance hall, past James, who was pretending not to hover. Outside, the morning had turned bright and clear, and Clara breathed it in like oxygen. She'd won, technically. The trust was still hers, the work would continue. But it felt hollow. She'd just told her sister to build her own life while simultaneously refusing to be part of it. She'd defended her choices while admitting she didn't fully understand them herself. And somewhere in London, Julian was waiting for an answer she didn't have. Clara made it to the drive before she heard footsteps behind her. Wait. Marion. Of course. Clara turned. Her sister stood in the doorway, backlit and small. And for a moment she looked exactly like she had at 18, fragile, uncertain, desperate for something Clara couldn't give. I'm sorry, Marion said. For the lumber, for the complaints, for all of it. I know. Do you? Marion walked closer. Because I'm not sure I do. Know why I keep attacking you, why I can't just let you go. Because I was your security, Clara said. Your fixed point. The sister who always sacrificed, always stepped aside, always chose you. And now I'm not doing that anymore, and you don't know how to exist without it. Marion flinched. That's cruel. It's true. Both things can be true. Marion stopped a few feet away. Clara, I don't want to be the person who needs saving anymore, but I don't know how to be anything else. You defined yourself by sacrificing for me. I defined myself by needing it, and now we're both lost. Clara felt tears burning. So what do we do? I don't know. Marion's voice broke. Maybe we figure it out separately, like you said. Build our own lives. Become people who can actually be sisters instead of savior and victim. That could take years. Do we have a choice? They looked at each other across the drive, and Clara saw it clearly. The distance between them wasn't about Julian or the trust or any specific fight. It was about two women who'd built their identities around each other and now had to learn to stand alone. No, Clara said. I don't think we do. Marion nodded once, then turned and walked back inside. Clara stood there for a long moment, feeling something essential shift. Then she climbed into the car James had waiting and headed back to Ashford. The school construction was nearly finished when disaster struck. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the board meeting. Clara was reviewing employment contracts with Mrs. Bramwell when Thomas burst into the cottage, face white. Fire, he gasped. The school! It's burning! They ran. Clara and Mrs. Bramwell and half the village racing toward the valley where smoke was already darkening the sky. The school, their beautiful, almost finished school, was engulfed in flames. The wood they'd fought for, the oak Pritchard had delivered, all of it burning. The village men formed bucket lines from the well. Women pulled equipment away from the flames. Children were herded to safety. And Clara stood frozen, watching 3 years of work disappear into smoke. How did this start? Mrs. Bramwell's voice cut through the chaos. Thomas pointed to the ground near the school's entrance. A broken lantern, and beside it, trampled into the mud, a monogrammed handkerchief, expensive silk, with the initials M.H. embroidered in silver thread. Clara picked it up with shaking hands. Marion had been here. That doesn't mean, Mrs. Bramwell started. It means exactly what it looks like. Clara's voice came out dead. She did this. She actually did this. The fire burned for 3 hours before they got it under control. By then, the school was gone. Just charred beams and ash and the smell of destruction thick in the air. Sarah Wickham was crying. Thomas looked gutted. The village families stood in stunned silence, watching their hope burn down to foundations. And Clara stood holding her sister's handkerchief, feeling something break inside her chest. Not grief, not shock. Rage. Pure, clean, devastating rage. Marion had tried the board meeting, tried the sabotage. And when those hadn't worked, when Clara had won and implemented better systems and kept building, Marion had burned it all down. We rebuild, Mrs. Bramwell said quietly. We have insurance. We have plans. We rebuild. With what? Clara's hands were shaking. The insurance won't cover full replacement. We don't have funds for materials. And even if we did, she looked at the destruction. Everyone will know Marion did this. Everyone will know a Halston destroyed their school. You're a Halston too. Exactly. Clara felt something crystallize in her chest, which means this is my responsibility to fix. She left the village in Mrs. Bramwell's hands, climbed into her car, and drove straight to London, to the Belgravia townhouse, to Marion. It was nearly midnight when she arrived. The house was dark except for one window on the second floor, Marion's room. Clara didn't knock, didn't wait. Used her key and walked straight upstairs. Marion was at her desk, still fully dressed, staring at nothing. She looked up when Clara entered, saw the handkerchief in her sister's hand, and went very still. It was an accident, Marion whispered. I just wanted to see it, to understand what you'd built. I brought a lantern and I must have knocked it over when I left. I didn't mean... You burned down a school. Clara's voice was ice. 30 children's education, 14 women's livelihoods, 3 years of work. Gone. Because you wanted to see it? I'm sorry. Sorry? Clara stepped closer. Marion, this isn't sabotage anymore. This isn't family drama. This is arson. Actual criminal arson. People could have been hurt, killed. No one was there. I made sure... That doesn't matter. Clara's control shattered. You destroyed something real, something good, because you couldn't stand that I built it without you, that I chose something over family, over you. Marion stood, hands shaking. I'll confess. I'll tell the authorities. I'll take responsibility. And destroy the Halston name, ruin any chance the trust has of rebuilding, make those families suffer even more? Clara laughed, bitter and broken. No, you don't get the relief of confession. You get something worse. What? Clara pulled out a document she'd drafted on the drive to London. You're going to fund the rebuild, every pound, from your personal inheritance. And you're going to do it anonymously through the trust so no one ever knows Marion Halston burned down their school. Marion took the paper with trembling hands. Read it. Went pale. This is half my inheritance. Consider it payment for destruction of property. Clara's voice was steel. Sign it. Tonight, or I take the handkerchief to the police and you explain to father why his daughter is facing criminal charges. Clara, please. Sign it. Marion looked at her sister, really looked, and saw something she'd never seen before. Not sacrifice, not nobility, just fury and judgment, and absolute certainty. She signed. Clara took the document, folded it carefully, and walked to the door. Don't come to Ashford, she said without turning around. Don't contact me. Don't try to help or fix or make this right. You wanted me to stop sacrificing for you? Congratulations. I'm done, completely done. We're not sisters anymore, Marion. We're strangers who share blood. That's all. But Clara was already gone, walking down the stairs, out the door, into the London night with her sister's signed confession and half an inheritance and a heart that had finally, completely, broken clean through. She made it to the street before collapsing against a wall, breathing hard, feeling everything she'd been holding together for weeks, months, years, finally come apart. And that's when she saw him, Julian, standing across the street, watching, like he'd been waiting, again. How long have you been there? Clara's voice came out raw. Long enough. He crossed to her slowly. Mrs. Bramwell sent a telegram about the fire. I came to... He stopped. I don't know what I came to do, just that you might need... Don't. Clara held up a hand. Don't try to save me. Don't try to fix this. Don't... Her voice broke. I just blackmailed my sister into funding a rebuild of the school she burned down. I'm not the person you think I am, Julian. I'm not noble or good or worth... I know. She looked up. What? I know you're not perfect. I know you manipulate and control and make terrible decisions trying to manage everyone's life. He stepped closer. I've known that for years, Clara. I loved you anyway. Loved, past tense. Love, present tense. Julian reached for her hand, but you're right about one thing. You need space. Time. You need to figure out who you are when you're not saving someone. So I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here to witness. Witness what? You. Finally breaking. Finally letting yourself fall apart instead of holding everything together. He squeezed her hand. You don't have to be strong right now, Clara. You just burned down your relationship with your sister to protect a village. You're allowed to grieve that. And something in Clara cracked wide open. She'd spent 3 years being strong, being controlled, managing outcomes and sacrificing and building and never ever letting herself just feel the cost. Now standing on a London street at midnight, holding Julian's hand with her sister's signed confession in her pocket. And her life's work burned to ash, Clara finally let herself break. She cried. Ugly, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and old and buried. Julian held her, not fixing, not solving, just holding while she fell apart. When she was done, when there was nothing left but exhaustion and raw grief, Clara pulled back. I still need space, she said. I still need to figure this out alone. I know. But she looked at him. Thank you for being here, for not trying to save me. Thank you for finally letting yourself need something. Julian stepped back. Go rebuild your school, Clara. Figure out who you are. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be waiting. He left. Clara watched him go, then looked down at the document in her hands. Half of Marion's inheritance. Enough to rebuild. Enough to make it right. But at what cost? She'd just severed ties with her sister. Maybe permanently. Chosen strangers over family. Work over blood. And standing there in the dark, Clara didn't know if that made her strong or just cruel. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done sacrificing, done managing, done being the good daughter who fixed everything. From now on, every choice would be hers, every consequence owned, even if it meant standing completely, utterly alone. Clara took the first train back to Ashford at dawn. Marion's signed document pressed flat in her case like evidence at a trial. The countryside rolled past in gray morning light, and she watched it without really seeing, her mind already working through logistics. Rebuilding costs, timeline, how to explain the sudden influx of funding without revealing its source, how to live with what she'd just done to her sister. Mrs. Bramwell was waiting at the station, looking like she hadn't slept either. She took one look at Clara's face and asked the only question that mattered. Did you get the money? Clara handed her the document, watched her read it, watched her eyebrows climb. Half her inheritance, Clara, that's more than we need. I know. Clara climbed into the waiting cart. The excess goes into a reserve fund for future emergencies, future sabotage. You think Marion will try again? I think Marion and I are done trying anything with each other. Clara's voice came out flat, dead. I told her to stay away, permanently. Mrs. Bramwell was quiet for a moment. Then, that must have hurt. It did. Clara looked at the older woman. Am I cruel? For taking her money? For cutting her off completely? Are you asking if you're like your father? The question landed like a blade between ribs. Clara flinched. Edward Halston would have taken the money and said nothing, Mrs. Bramwell continued. You took the money and it's eating you alive. That's the difference. She flicked the reins, started the cart moving. You made a hard choice, Clara. Maybe the right one. Maybe not. But it was yours to make. They rode the rest of the way in silence. The village was already stirring when they arrived. People gathering at the burn site, picking through ash, salvaging what little remained. Sarah Wickham was organizing the children into groups, trying to maintain some structure even without a building. Thomas Gray stood surveying the damage with his crew, their faces grim. Clara climbed down from the cart and walked into the middle of the destruction. Everyone stop, she called. Heads turned. Conversation died. 30 people, maybe more, looked at her with expressions ranging from grief to anger to desperate hope. I know what you're thinking, Clara said, that this is over, that the school is gone and there's no money to rebuild, and the Halstons have failed you again. She pulled out Marion's document. You're wrong, she explained quickly, efficiently. Anonymous donation. Full funding. Rebuild starting immediately. No names, no questions, no delays. Who donated? Someone called from the back. Someone who owed a debt, Clara said, which was true enough. Does it matter? Silence. Then Thomas spoke up. It matters that we get our school back, that our children get educated, that we keep going. He looked at Clara. If you say the funding's there, that's good enough for me. Murmurs of agreement. Not everyone. Clara could see skepticism on some faces, suspicion on others. But enough. Enough to move forward. We start today, Clara said. Thomas, get your crew together. Sarah, keep the children on their regular schedule. We'll hold classes in the village hall until the building's ready. Everyone else, if you can spare time to help clear the site, we need you. They scattered to work. Clara stood in the middle of the ash and felt something shift inside her chest. Not peace, not pride, just determination. She'd burned her family to the ground to protect this. Now she had to make it worth it. The rebuild took 6 weeks of brutal, relentless work. Clara was on site every day, dawn to dusk, hauling debris and holding levels, and learning construction from the ground up. Her hands blistered, healed, blistered again. She lost weight she didn't have to lose, slept 4 hours a night, and ran on tea in stubborn fury. And slowly, painfully, the school rose from ash. New oak beams stronger than before, better foundation, proper ventilation. Thomas's crew worked with precision that bordered on reverence, like they were building a cathedral instead of a one-room schoolhouse. You're going to collapse if you don't rest, Mrs. Bramwell said one evening, finding Clara still on site after everyone else had left. I'm fine. You're not. You haven't been fine since London. Mrs. Bramwell sat on a stack of lumber. What happened with Marion? Really happened. Clara kept hammering. I told you. I got the funding. I cut ties. We're done. And Julian? The hammer slipped, nearly caught her thumb. What about him? He's been here. Clara's head snapped up. What? 3 times in the last month. Stays at the inn, walks the valley. Doesn't approach you, doesn't interfere. Just watches. Mrs. Bramwell's expression was careful. You know he's there, don't you? Clara set down the hammer. I've seen someone, on the ridge, thought I was imagining it. He's waiting. I told him I needed space, and he's giving it to you from a distance. Mrs. Bramwell stood. That's not pressure, Clara. That's patience. I don't know what to do with patience. Maybe that's the point. Mrs. Bramwell headed toward the village. Maybe you're supposed to learn. Clara stayed until full dark, then walked back to the cottage alone. And there, sitting on her front step like he'd been waiting. Not Julian. Her father. Edward Halston looked older than Clara remembered, grayer, tired in a way that went bone deep. He stood when he saw her, brushed off his coat with habitual precision. I've been waiting 2 hours, he said. You work too late. What are you doing here? Clara's voice came out harder than intended. Marion told me. He gestured to the cottage door. May I come in? Clara wanted to say no, wanted to turn him away, protect her space, keep Halston family politics out of the one place she'd built for herself. But he was still her father. She unlocked the door. Let him in. Put the kettle on because that's what you did. You offered tea even when you wanted to scream. Edward sat at her small table, looking incongruous and uncomfortable in the simple kitchen. He waited until she'd poured tea before speaking. Marion told me what she did, he said quietly. The fire, the handkerchief, the arrangement you forced her into. Clara's hand tightened on her cup. Did she tell you why I did it? She told me she burned down your school, that you blackmailed her into funding the rebuild. Edward met her eyes. She also told me you cut her off completely, told her you're not sisters anymore. We're not. Clara, no. Clara set down her cup carefully. I spent 3 years sacrificing for Marion, managing her happiness, giving up everything I wanted so she could be healthy. And when I finally stopped, when I finally chose something for myself, she tried to destroy it, twice. Then she actually succeeded. Clara's voice shook. I'm done, Father. Done sacrificing. Done being the good daughter who fixes Marion's problems. She made her choice. I made mine. Edward was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Clara never expected. You're right. She stared. What? You're right. I asked too much of you, expected you to parent your sister, manage her illness, sacrifice your own life to keep her stable. He looked old suddenly, ancient. Your mother was the same way, always putting Marion first, and when she died, I just expected you to step into that role. Never asked if you wanted to, never considered the cost. Clara felt something crack in her chest. You knew. About Julian. About what I did. I suspected. Marion was too healthy too quickly, and you were too careful never to be in the same room with him. Edward's jaw tightened. I told myself it was for the best, that Marion needed him more, that you were strong enough to handle it. I wasn't. I know, I see that now. He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Clara, what Marion did, the fire, the sabotage, that's inexcusable. And I support your decision to protect your work, even at her expense. But cutting her off completely? Telling her you're not sisters anymore? That's fair, Clara interrupted. That's fair. She tried to destroy the one thing I built for myself. She gets consequences. She gets punishment, Edward corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Clara stood too agitated to sit. Because from where I'm standing, Marion has spent her entire life being protected from consequences, shielded by her illness, by family, by me. And look what it created. A woman who thinks burning down a school is an acceptable response to feeling abandoned. She's sick, Clara. She was sick. Past tense. Clara's voice was steel. Marion's health has been stable for 3 years. She doesn't shake anymore. Doesn't have episodes. The only thing wrong with Marion now is that she's been taught that being fragile excuses everything. She turned to face her father. I'm not doing that anymore. Not for her. Not for you. Not for anyone. Edward looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, he said. I can't make you forgive her. I can't make you be sisters again. But Clara... He stood, moved toward the door. Don't let what Marion did turn you into someone as hard as me. Someone who values work over people, control over connection. Maybe that's who I am, Clara said quietly. Maybe I've always been in Edward Halston's daughter. Just took me 25 years to accept it. Her father flinched, visibly flinched, like she'd struck him. I hope not, he said, then left. Clara stood alone in her cottage and felt the weight of his words settle over her like ash. Was she becoming her father? Cutting off family, choosing work over relationship, building walls instead of bridges? Or was she finally becoming herself? She didn't know. And that terrified her more than anything Marion had done. The school was finished on a Tuesday in late October, 6 weeks after the fire. Clara stood in the doorway of the completed building and felt nothing. She'd expected relief, or pride, or satisfaction. Something to mark the victory, the survival, the fact that she'd actually done it. Instead, she just felt tired. It's beautiful, Sarah Wickham said, coming to stand beside her. Better than before, even. It was true. The new school was larger, brighter, better built. They had proper desks now instead of rough benches, real slates and chalk, books donated from 3 different counties after word of the fire spread. We did it, Clara said, tried to mean it. You did it, Sarah corrected. You and whatever guardian angel donated that money. She glanced at Clara. You never did tell us who it was. Does it matter? I suppose not. Sarah walked into the classroom, ran her hand over the new teacher's desk. The children start Monday. 42 enrolled now. Word spread after the fire. Families from neighboring villages want to send their kids. 42 children. Double the original number. Clara should have felt triumphant. She felt hollow. Clara? Sarah was watching her with concern. Are you all right? I'm fine. You're not. You haven't been since the fire. Sarah moved closer. Whatever it cost you to get this rebuilt, that money, that donation, it was too much, wasn't it? Clara looked at the woman she'd hired, the teacher she'd trusted with educating a generation of Ashford children, and felt suddenly desperately tired of lying. It cost me my sister, she said quietly. My family. Maybe my soul. I don't know anymore. Sarah didn't look shocked, just sad. Was it worth it? Clara looked around the classroom, at the desks and books and blackboard, at the physical proof that she'd built something real, something lasting, something that mattered. Ask me in 20 years, she said, When those 42 children have grown up literate and capable, when they've built their own lives without the limitations their parents faced. She turned to Sarah. Ask me then if it was worth it. And if I asked you now? Clara opened her mouth, closed it. The truth was too complicated, too raw. Now I don't know, she admitted. I just know I couldn't let Marion destroy this, even if stopping her destroyed us. The school opened on Monday to a crowd that spilled out the door. Parents, children, villagers who'd helped rebuild. County officials curious about the school that had risen from ash. Even Lord Ashford made an appearance, ancient and approving. Clara stood to the side, watching Sarah organize the chaos into something resembling order. Watching the children's faces light up as they saw the new building, the books, the space created just for them. This was what she'd fought for, what she'd sacrificed for, differently this time, but sacrificed nonetheless. And it was good, real, important. So why did it still feel like loss? Impressive turnout. Clara turned. Julian stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. You came, she said stupidly. Mrs. Bramwell sent word the school was opening, thought I should see it. He glanced at the building. It's beautiful, Clara, really beautiful. Thomas and his crew did most of it. But you made it happen. Julian moved closer. Even after the fire, after everything, you made it happen. Clara felt something twist in her chest. At what cost? Does that matter? Doesn't it? She turned to face him fully. Julian, I blackmailed my sister, took half her inheritance, cut her out of my life completely to protect this. She gestured at the school. What does that make me? Human, Julian said simply. Flawed, complicated. Someone who made a hard choice in an impossible situation. Or someone who's become exactly like my father, cold, calculating, choosing work over family. Are you? Julian studied her face. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who spent 6 weeks working herself to exhaustion, rebuilding something Marion destroyed. Someone who can't even enjoy this victory because you're too busy punishing yourself for surviving it. Clara felt tears burning. I told her we weren't sisters anymore. I meant it. What kind of person does that? The kind who's been saving everyone else their entire life and finally chose to save herself. Julian reached for her hand carefully. Clara, what Marion did was unforgivable. You had every right to protect your work, to demand restitution, to set boundaries. By severing the relationship completely? Is that what you actually want? Or is that what you think you deserve? The question hit like a punch to the gut. Clara pulled her hand back. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore except that I'm tired of hurting people. Tired of choosing between family and work. Tired of... She stopped. I'm just tired, Julian. Then rest. I can't. Why not? Because if I stop moving, if I stop building, I have to face what I've actually done, who I've actually become. Clara's voice broke. And I'm afraid of what I'll see. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've been staying in Ashford for 6 weeks, watching you work, watching you rebuild. Want to know what I saw? What? Someone who cares so deeply about doing the right thing that she's destroying herself trying to figure out what that is. He stepped closer. Clara, you're not your father. You're not cold or calculating. You're just tired of sacrificing, and you don't know how to be anything else yet. So what do? You let yourself be imperfect. You let yourself make hard choices without self-flagellation. You accept that you can love your sister and still need distance from her, that you can build something meaningful and still grieve what it cost. He touched her face gently. You let yourself be human instead of heroic. Clara closed her eyes, felt tears slip free. I don't know if I can forgive myself for what I did to Marion. Then don't. Not yet. Julian's thumb brushed her cheek. But don't let guilt destroy what you've built either. These children need this school. This village needs this work. And you need to see that choosing yourself doesn't make you a villain. Even when it hurts people I love, especially then. Julian stepped back, giving her space. Marion burned down your school, Clara. You didn't choose yourself over her out of nowhere. You chose yourself because she forced you to. There's a difference. The school bell rang, Clara calling the children to order. The crowd began filtering inside, eager to see the classroom, to witness the beginning. You should go in, Julian said. This is your victory. You should see it. Will you come with me? He smiled. Is that what you want? Clara thought about it, about walking into that school alone, carrying the weight of everything it had cost, about walking in with Julian beside her, sharing the burden, about finally letting herself want something without immediately calculating who it would hurt. Yes, she said, I want you there. They walked in together. The classroom was chaos. Children running between desks, parents asking questions, Sarah trying to establish order with limited success. Clara stood in the doorway watching it all and felt something in her chest loosen. This was real, messy and imperfect and loud, but real. Built from ash and guilt and her sister's inheritance and her own desperate determination. And it was hers. Thomas caught her eye from across the room, raised his cup of tea in silent salute. Mrs. Bramwell nodded approval. Lord Ashford was boring Reverend Michaels with architectural observations. It was perfect in its imperfection. Miss Halston, a small girl, Emma, one of the original 30 students, ran up, breathless with excitement. We have real books and slates, and Miss Wickham says we're learning multiplication next week. That's wonderful, Emma. Is it true you rebuilt it all yourself? The child's eyes were wide. After the fire? Clara glanced at Julian. I had help. But you made it happen. Everyone says so, that you fought for us. Emma grabbed her hand. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. The child ran off before Clara could respond. She stood there, hand still warm from Emma's grip, and felt something crack open inside. She hadn't given up. Despite everything, the sabotage, the fire, the family destruction, she'd kept going, built something that mattered, created space for children like Emma to learn and grow and become something more than their circumstances allowed. And yes, it had cost her Marion, cost her family peace, cost her pieces of herself she might never get back. But standing in that classroom full of children with real books and futures that stretched beyond illiteracy and limitation, Clara couldn't quite bring herself to regret it. You're smiling, Julian said quietly. Am I? First time in 6 weeks. He touched her hand lightly. It looks good on you. Clara looked at him, really looked, saw the patience in his eyes, the steadiness, the willingness to wait while she figured herself out, saw the man she'd loved and given away and been too afraid to reclaim, and made a choice, not sacrifice, not strategy, just choice. I'm not ready yet, she said, to be with you, to trust myself not to manage or control or give you away again, but She took his hand. I want to try, to learn how. If you're willing to be patient while I figure it out. Julian's face lit up. I can be patient? It might take months, years even. I have time. I might fail, might not be capable of being with someone without sacrificing myself into nothing. Then we'll figure that out together. He squeezed her hand. But Clara, I've watched you rebuild a school from ash while rebuilding yourself. If anyone can learn to choose without sacrificing, it's you. Sarah was calling for attention, preparing to make an opening speech. The crowd settled. Clara should have been up there. She'd founded the trust, funded the rebuild, fought for every plank and nail. Instead, she stood in the back with Julian's hand in hers, watching Sarah speak about education and community and the power of persistence, and felt for the first time in months like maybe she'd made the right choice. Not the easy one, not the one that kept everyone happy, but the one that was hers. The ceremony ended with applause and cake Mrs. Bramwell had somehow produced. Children scattered to explore their new classroom. Parents lingered to talk, to thank Clara, to express cautious hope about the future. Clara accepted it all with growing steadiness. This was her work, her community, her choice. And when a rider appeared in the doorway with a telegram, Clara's first thought wasn't panic. It was curiosity. The telegram was from London, from Marion. School opened successfully. Saw the notice in the paper. I'm glad. You were right. I needed consequences. I'm learning to live with them. Don't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But know that what you built matters. Even if we never speak again, know that it matters. M. Clara read it twice, felt Julian reading over her shoulder. Are you going to respond? He asked quietly. Clara thought about it. About extending an olive branch, about rebuilding bridges, about doing the noble thing and forgiving, about whether she wanted to or just thought she should. Not yet, she said finally. Maybe not ever, but I'll keep the telegram. She folded it carefully, tucked it into her pocket. Evidence that Marian understood, at least, that the consequences Clara had demanded had landed. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. The celebration wound down as afternoon turned to evening. Families drifted home, children exhausted from excitement, the village settling into the comfortable quiet of work completed. Clara stood in the empty classroom as the sun set, Julian beside her, and looked at what she'd built. It wasn't perfect. The windows didn't quite match. One wall was slightly crooked. There were scars from the fire that would never fully disappear. But it stood, solid and real and full of promise, like her. What are you thinking? Julian asked. Clara turned to him, saw the last light gilding his face, and felt something settle into place. I'm thinking I spent 3 years believing sacrifice was love, she said, that giving things up made me noble, made me good. And now? Now I think love is choosing. Messy, imperfect, sometimes cruel choosing. And She took his hand again. I'm ready to start learning how to do that. With you. If the offer still stands. Julian's smile was sunrise. The offer stands. Even though I'm broken, still figuring myself out, probably going to make 100 more mistakes, especially because of that. He pulled her closer. Clara Halston, flawed and figuring it out, is a lot more interesting than Clara Halston, perfect martyr. She laughed, actually laughed, full and real, and kissed him. Not desperate, not controlled, just honest. A kiss that said, I'm here, I'm choosing this. I'm still afraid, but I'm trying. When they pulled apart, the classroom was dark except for the last rays of sun through the crooked windows. Come on, Julian said. Mrs. Bramwell invited me to dinner, said you'd need feeding after today. She's probably right. They walked out together, locking the school behind them. Tomorrow it would fill with children and noise and the work of education. But tonight it was just potential, waiting, patient, solid. Clara looked back once as they walked toward the village, saw her school silhouetted against the evening sky. Not perfect, not untouched, but standing, just like her. Mrs. Bramwell's cottage smelled like roast chicken and something Clara couldn't quite identify. Rosemary, maybe, or thyme. The older woman had set 3 places at her small table, candles already lit, like she'd known all along that Clara wouldn't be eating alone tonight. Sit, Mrs. Bramwell ordered, not looking up from the stove. Both of you. And don't hover, Julian. You're making me nervous. Julian sat obediently. Clara hid a smile and took the chair beside him. How did you know I'd bring him? Clara asked. Because you finally stopped running. Mrs. Bramwell set down plates heaped with food, chicken, potatoes, vegetables that actually looked appealing instead of overcooked. About time, too. I was getting tired of watching you torture yourself. I wasn't. You were. Mrs. Bramwell sat across from them, fixed Clara with that sharp stare. 6 weeks of punishing yourself for protecting what you built. 6 weeks of acting like choosing yourself made you a monster. It was exhausting to watch. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I destroyed my relationship with Marian, took half her inheritance, cut her out of my life. After she burned down a school, Julian interrupted quietly. Clara, we've been over this. He's right, Mrs. Bramwell said. Marian made her choice. You made yours. Now you both get to live with the consequences. She passed the potatoes. Eat. You're too thin. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, actually good, the kind of home cooking Clara had forgotten existed outside of childhood memories. She found herself eating more than she'd intended, her body apparently deciding it was time to start taking care of itself again. So what happens now? Mrs. Bramwell asked eventually. School's open, village is stable. You two are... What, exactly? Clara and Julian exchanged glances. We're trying, Clara said carefully, to figure out what we are without sacrifice or strategy or manipulation. Good luck with that. Mrs. Bramwell's tone was dry. "You're both Halston adjacent. Strategy is in your blood." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Julian muttered. "I'm not here to coddle you." Mrs. Bramwell stood, started clearing plates. "I'm here to remind you that real relationships are messy. You're going to make mistakes, hurt each other, probably fall into old patterns a dozen times before you figure out something better." She looked at Clara. "But if you're willing to stay and work instead of running or sacrificing, you might actually build something real." Clara felt something settle in her chest. "I'm staying." "Good." Mrs. Bramwell smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. "Because this village needs you, and you," she pointed at Julian, "stick around or don't. But if you hurt her, I'll make you regret it." Julian raised his hands in surrender. "Noted." They left an hour later, walking back toward the cottage under a sky full of stars. The valley spread out below them, lights scattered like small promises. The school, the village, the work that had nearly destroyed Clara and somehow saved her instead. "Where are you staying tonight?" Clara asked as they reached the cottage door. Julian hesitated. "The inn, like always. Or—" Clara stopped, made herself say it. "You could stay here. Not like that. I'm not ready for that. But there's a spare room, and I'd like you close, if that's all right." Julian's expression softened. "That's more than all right." They went inside. Clara showed him the spare room, small, simple, but clean. He set down his bag and turned to find her still standing in the doorway. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me in. Even just this much." "Thank you for waiting." Clara touched his hand briefly. "Good night, Julian." "Good night." She closed the door, went to her own room, and slept dreamlessly for the first time in months. The next week settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Clara managed the trust, oversaw the school's daily operation, handled the endless small emergencies that came with running a community organization. Julian stayed, not hovering, not managing, just present. He took work at Thomas's construction company, spent his days doing honest labor, his evenings reading in the cottage while Clara worked on budgets and planning. They were learning each other again, slowly, carefully, without the weight of sacrifice or manipulation pressing down on every moment. It wasn't perfect. Clara still caught herself trying to manage his mood, anticipating his needs, sacrificing her own wants to keep things smooth. And Julian still looked at her sometimes like she might disappear, like the woman he loved might evaporate back into noble martyrdom. But they were trying, and that felt like enough. 3 weeks after the school opening, a letter arrived from Edward Halston. Clara opened it at breakfast, Julian watching from across the table. "Clara, the Trust's quarterly report shows remarkable progress. School enrollment doubled, employment stable, community investment yielding measurable returns. The board has taken notice. Lord Ashford has proposed expanding the model, establishing similar trusts in 3 neighboring counties, with you as regional director. It would mean more responsibility, more visibility, and significant additional funding. It would also mean returning to London periodically for board meetings, working with Marion, who sits on the Regional Oversight Committee. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking if you can work with her professionally while maintaining personal boundaries. If you can separate family drama from effective governance. The decision is yours. It's always been yours, Clara. I'm only just learning to accept that. Father." Clara read it twice, handed it to Julian. "Regional Director," he said after reading. Clara, that's recognition, real recognition. It's also working with Marion, professionally, with boundaries." Julian set down the letter. "Could you do that?" Clara thought about her sister, about Marion's telegram, the acknowledgement without apology, about 3 years of sacrifice followed by sabotage, followed by consequences that had landed like they were supposed to. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to say yes, to expand the work, help more people, build something bigger than just Ashford. But another part," she stopped. "Another part is afraid that if I see Marion, I'll either crumble and forgive everything or I'll hurt her worse just to prove I can." "So which part do you listen to? That's the question, isn't it?" Clara stood, walked to the window. Outside, children were heading to school, books under their arms, futures opening up with every lesson. I spent 3 years listening to the part that said sacrifice everything. Now I'm trying to listen to the part that says, choose yourself. But what if there's a middle ground? What if I can build something bigger without sacrificing myself and keep boundaries with Marion without destroying her? Do you want a middle ground with Marion? Julian's voice was careful. Or do you want permission to keep punishing her? The question landed hard. I don't know, Clara said honestly. I'm still angry, still hurt, still convinced that she'd sabotage me again if given the chance. Then say no. Tell your father you're not ready to work with her. Stay in Ashford. Focus on the work here. Live the life you've built. Julian came to stand beside her. But Clara, don't say no out of fear or revenge. Say no because it's actually what you want. Clara looked at him. And if I want to say yes, to take the position and expand the work, even though it means seeing Marion, then we figure out how to make that work. Together. He touched her hand. But you have to decide what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what punishes Marion most effectively. What you want. Clara turned back to the window, watched the children disappear into the school she'd rebuilt from ash and guilt and determination. What did she want? The answer came quietly. Certainly. She wanted to build, to expand the work beyond Ashford, to create systems that lasted beyond her lifetime, to give more children what Emma and her classmates were getting. She wanted to prove that the trust model worked, that investment in education and employment could transform communities. And yes, buried underneath everything else, she wanted Marion to see it, to watch Clara build something remarkable and know that burning it down had failed. Was that revenge? Or just truth? Clara didn't know. But she knew what she was going to do. I'm going to say yes, she told Julian, to the regional position, to working with Marion professionally, not because I've forgiven her, not because I'm ready for reconciliation, but because the work matters more than our family drama. Julian studied her face. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. Clara turned to him. That's growth, right? Choosing the uncertain thing because it matters instead of the safe thing because it's easy? That's terrifying, actually, Julian smiled. But yes, it's growth. Clara wrote back to her father that afternoon. Acceptance, terms, boundaries regarding Marion that were professional and absolute. They would work together on oversight committees, nothing more. No family dinners, no attempts at reconciliation, just governance. Edward's response came within days. Agreement, approval, and something that looked almost like pride. The regional directorship started in January. Clara spent November and December building the infrastructure, hiring assistants, establishing protocols, training Sarah Wickham to take over daily operations in Ashford. It was exhausting and exhilarating and nothing like the quiet, controlled work she'd been doing. This was expansion, growth, power used properly instead of sacrificed away. Julian watched her transform from exhausted builder to confident leader, and something in his expression shifted. Not the love that had always been there, but respect. Recognition that the woman he'd loved 3 years ago had become someone stronger, sharper, more certain of her own worth. You're terrifying when you're confident, he told her one evening as she reviewed contracts for the Second County Trust. Good. Clara didn't look up. I've been accommodating for too long. Time to be terrifying. I love you, you know. That made her look up. They'd been dancing around the words for weeks, both of them afraid to say it first. I know, Clara said quietly. I love you too, even though I'm still figuring out how to do that without sacrificing myself. You're doing better than you think. Julian came to sit beside her. 6 months ago, you would have dropped everything to make me comfortable. Now you're finishing your contracts and trusting me to wait. Is that love? Or just selfishness? It's balance. He kissed her forehead. Keep working. I'll make tea. The first board meeting was in London in late January. Clara arrived early, prepared, armed with documentation that made her Ashford reports look amateurish. She'd learned, adapted, built systems that would survive scrutiny from people actively looking for failure. The boardroom was in a building near Parliament, all dark wood and expensive carpets, the kind of place that screamed old money and older power. Clara walked in wearing her best dress, hair pinned back, every inch the professional regional director. And sitting at the far end of the table, carefully not looking at her, Marion. They hadn't seen each other since London, since the signed document and the severed relationship and the choice that had burned everything down. Marion looked different, thinner, quieter, dressed in dark colors that suggested mourning or penance. She didn't acknowledge Clara's entrance, just stared at her hands, folded carefully on the table. Edward opened the meeting. Introductions, formalities, procedural nonsense. Clara waded through it all, patient and controlled. Then came the reports. She presented Ashford first. Numbers that spoke for themselves. Enrollment doubled, employment stable, literacy rates climbing. Then the expansion plans. 3 counties, each with similar demographics, each ready for the same model. Investment required, expected returns, timeline for implementation. It was airtight, professional, undeniable. Questions? Edward asked when she finished. Silence. Then Marion spoke. The Ashford model assumes consistent funding. What happens when donations dry up? When public interest moves elsewhere? Clara had expected this. Sustainability is built into the model. After year 3, each trust becomes partially self-funding through employment programs that generate revenue. Education feeds skilled labor, which feeds economic growth, which feeds back into education funding. And if it fails, if the cycle breaks, then we've still educated 30 to 40 children per location, employed a dozen families, created infrastructure that outlasts the initial investment. Clara met her sister's eyes directly. Failure isn't permanent, Marion. It's just feedback. Something flickered in Marion's expression, not anger, something softer. The budget for County 2 seems optimistic, Marion continued. Building costs have increased since Ashford, which is reflected in the adjusted figures on page 7. Clara didn't break eye contact. I learned from Ashford's mistakes, including the ones caused by sabotage. The room went very quiet. Marion's face went pale, but she didn't look away. Then I have no further questions. The plan is sound. Lord Ashford cleared his throat. I move to approve Clara Halston's expansion proposal. Full funding, 3 counties, 5-year timeline. Second, said Reverend Michaels quietly. Edward looked at Marion. As Oversight Committee Chair, you'll be working with Clara directly. Any concerns about that arrangement? Marion finally looked away. No concerns. Miss Halston is, she paused, capable, professional. The work will be in good hands. Miss Halston, not sister, not Clara. Professional distance made formal. It hurt, and it was exactly right. Then we're agreed, Edward said. Clara, congratulations. You're officially regional director. The meeting continued. Budgets, timelines, administrative details. Clara participated with half her attention. The rest focused on Marion sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, contributing when required, silent otherwise. When it ended, Marion left quickly. Didn't approach, didn't acknowledge. Just gathered her things and disappeared. Clara found her in the hallway outside, standing by a window, shoulders tight. Marion. Her sister turned. Up close, the changes were more obvious. Shadows under her eyes, a brittleness that suggested sleep wasn't coming easy. Guilt lived in those shadows. Clara recognized it because she'd worn it herself for months. You didn't have to defend the plan, Clara said carefully. You could have voted against it. It's a good plan. Personal feelings don't change facts. Marion's voice was flat, professional. You've built something remarkable, Clara. It deserves expansion, even though it cost you half your inheritance. I burned down a school. The cost was fair. Marion looked out the window at London traffic below. I've spent 3 months in therapy, learning why I did what I did, learning that fragility isn't the same as brokenness, that being sick didn't excuse. She stopped. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I understand what I did and why it was unforgivable. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something. Therapy? She asked quietly. Father insisted, after the fire. Said if I wanted to remain part of the family, I needed to understand why I kept destroying things. Marion's smile was bitter. Turns out being treated like glass for 20 years creates patterns. Who knew? Marion, I'm not fragile anymore, Clara. Maybe I never was. Maybe it was just easier to be delicate than to be responsible. Marian finally met her eyes. You were right to cut me off, right to demand consequences, and I'm trying to become someone who deserves a second chance, even if you never give it to me. Clara looked at her sister, really looked. Saw the guilt, yes, but also effort, growth. Someone trying to change instead of just apologizing. We're not going to be sisters again, Clara said slowly. Not the way we were. That relationship was built on sacrifice and sickness, and neither of us being honest. Marian flinched but nodded. I know. But we could be colleagues, professional partners in this work. Clara gestured at the boardroom behind them. I can work with you on oversight, trust you with governance, as long as the boundaries are clear. What boundaries? No personal conversations, no family dinners, no attempts to rebuild what we had. Clara's voice was firm. We work together because the work matters, not because we're sisters. Can you do that? Marian was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes, I can do that. Good. Clara turned to leave, then paused. Marian? The telegram you sent, after the school opened. Thank you for that. I meant it, every word. I know. Clara walked away, feeling something settle. Not resolution, not reconciliation, just clarity. She and Marian would never be what they were, but maybe they could be something else, something professional and distant and sustainable. Maybe that was enough. Julian was waiting outside the building, leaning against a lamppost like he had all those months ago when Clara's world was ending. Now he was just there, solid, patient, real. How did it go? He asked. I got the position. Full approval. Clara took his hand. And Marian and I, we're not sisters anymore, but we're colleagues. It's not perfect, but it's honest. Honest is good. Julian pulled her closer. Better than perfect, usually. They walked through London together, and Clara felt the city differently now. Not the place where she'd lost everything, but the place where she'd learned to choose, to build, to stand alone when necessary, and accept partnership when offered. By March, the expansion was underway. 3 counties, 3 new schools, dozens of new families employed and educated. Clara split her time between locations, Julian traveling with her when construction required his expertise, Mrs. Bramwell managing Ashford with iron efficiency. The work was brutal, exhausting. Nothing like the quiet martyrdom of 3 years ago. It was perfect. In April, Clara stood on a windswept boundary field between Ashford and the 2nd County, reviewing construction plans with Thomas, when she saw a figure walking toward them across the spring grass. Marian. Clara's first instinct was suspicion, but her sister was alone, carrying no documents, no agenda visible. I'll give you 2 privacy, Thomas said, reading the situation. He headed back toward the construction site. Marian stopped a respectful distance away. She looked better than she had in January, healthier, more solid, like therapy was actually working. What are you doing here? Clara asked. Not hostile, just curious. I wanted to see it, the expansion, what my money built. Marian gestured at the half-finished school behind them. I know I don't have a right to be here, but I needed to see it. Clara studied her sister, looking for manipulation, for hidden agenda, found only genuine curiosity. It's yours as much as mine, Clara said carefully. Your inheritance funded the rebuild. This expansion wouldn't exist without that. It wouldn't exist without you rebuilding after I destroyed it. Marian stepped closer. Clara, I'm not here to apologize again or to ask for forgiveness. I'm here because... She stopped, started again. I'm learning to live with what I did, to own it, and part of that is seeing what survived anyway. They stood in silence, watching construction workers frame walls and lay foundations. It's bigger than I expected, Marian said eventually. The school, the impact. 3 more after this, maybe more if the model proves sustainable. Clara felt pride rise, uncomplicated by guilt. We're changing how rural education works, creating systems that last. You're changing it. I'm just trying not to destroy it again. Marian turned to face her fully. I know we're not sisters anymore. I know we're just colleagues. But Clara, I'm proud of you, for what you built, for choosing yourself, for being stronger than I ever was. Clara felt tears burn, not grief, Not anger, just recognition. You're getting stronger too, she said quietly. I can see it. The therapy, the work. You're not the fragile girl who needed saving anymore. No. I'm the woman who burned down a school and is trying to live with it. Marian's smile was sad. Not exactly an improvement. It's honest. That's something. Clara took a breath. Marian, I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. I don't know if we'll ever be more than professional partners, but I don't hate you, and I don't want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. What do I do instead? Build something. Clara gestured at the school rising behind them. You have resources, intelligence, time. Build something good. Not to make up for what you destroyed, that's impossible, but because you deserve a life that's more than penance. Marian looked at the construction site, something shifting in her expression. I've been thinking about education reform. Policy level. Using my inheritance to fund legislative change. That's good work. It's not hands-on like yours, not real in the same way. It's still real, just different. Clara held out her hand. Maybe we balance each other. I build schools, you change policy. Both matter. Marian looked at the offered hand for a long moment, then took it. They shook, formal, professional, distant, but honest. I should go, Marian said. Let you get back to work. Marian? Clara stopped her. Thank you for the funding, for understanding why I couldn't forgive you, for trying to become someone better. Thank you for not letting what I did destroy you. Marian walked away across the field, getting smaller against the spring sky. Clara watched her go and felt something release. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just letting go. Of the anger, the guilt, the obligation to either punish or save. Marian was her own person now, making her own choices, living with her own consequences. And Clara was free. Julian appeared beside her, must have been watching from a distance. That looked intense. It was. Clara leaned into him. But good. We're not sisters, we're not friends, but we're something. Something honest. Honest is your specialty lately. He kissed the top of her head. I'm proud of you. For what? For letting her be complicated. For not demanding she be either villain or victim. For letting both of you be human. Clara turned in his arms, looked up at him. I love you. I know. Julian smiled. You tell me every day now. It's nice. I'm learning. She kissed him. Learning to choose you without sacrificing myself. Learning to build a life that's mine. Learning to let people be imperfect without trying to fix them. How's it going? Terribly. I still try to manage your happiness at least twice a day. And I still expect you to disappear into martyrdom. Julian touched her face. But we're trying. That's what matters. They stood together on the boundary field, watching the school take shape, and Clara felt the full weight of everything she'd built. Not just the schools, not just the trust. Herself. The woman who'd sacrificed Julian and destroyed her relationship with Marian to learn how to choose. Who'd taken consequences and turned them into growth. Who'd rebuilt from ash, not just buildings, but her own identity. It wasn't perfect. She still made mistakes, still hurt people, still struggled with the difference between love and sacrifice. But she was trying, choosing, building, and that felt like enough. By autumn, all 3 county schools were operational. Clara stood in the largest one, the second county's main building, and watched 90 children settle into desks, crack open books, begin the slow work of learning. 90 children who wouldn't grow up illiterate, who wouldn't face the limitations their parents had, who would build lives beyond what geography and poverty had planned for them. This was what sacrifice looked like when it was choice instead of martyrdom, work instead of suffering, impact instead of noble pain. Sarah Wickham had trained 3 new teachers. Thomas's construction company had expanded to handle the building demand. Mrs. Bramwell was training regional coordinators to manage daily operations. The work was becoming sustainable, systematic, real. Miss Halston, a young girl, maybe 10, approached shyly. Is it true you built all of this? All 3 schools? Clara knelt down. I helped build them, along with a lot of other people. Why? Because I want to do what you did. When I grow up, build schools, help people. The girl's eyes were bright with determination. My teacher says education is power, that it changes everything. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Your teacher is right. Then I'm going to get educated, and then I'm going to build things. Like you. The girl ran off before Clara could respond. Julian, who'd been watching from the doorway, came to stand beside her. That's legacy. That's terrifying. Clara stood, brushed off her skirt. What if I fail her? What if the schools close or the funding dries up? Or what if she grows up educated and capable and builds something even bigger? Julian took her hand. Clara, you can't control outcomes. You can only create opportunities. That's what you've done. What she does with it is her choice. When did you get so wise? I've been watching you for a year. Some of it rubbed off. He pulled her closer. Come on. Mrs. Bramwell is hosting a celebration dinner. Your father's coming. Even Marion, apparently. Clara tensed. Marion's coming. As colleague, professional distance maintained. Julian studied her face. Can you handle that? Clara thought about it. About sitting across a table from Marion, making small talk about trust business, maintaining boundaries that were professional instead of personal. A year ago, it would have destroyed her. 6 months ago, it would have been impossible. Now? Yes, she said. I can handle it. The dinner was at Mrs. Bramwell's cottage, expanded with borrowed furniture and enough food to feed twice the actual guest list. Edward arrived exactly on time, looking older but somehow lighter, like cutting Clara loose from expectation had freed him too. Marion came last, dressed simply, keeping to the edges. They ate. They talked about trust business, expansion plans, policy reform Marion was proposing. It was professional, distant, carefully boundaried. It was perfect. Halfway through dessert, Edward cleared his throat. I'd like to propose a toast. Everyone looked up. To Clara, Edward continued, raising his glass, who took an inheritance meant to control her future and turned it into freedom. Who built something real from sacrifice and ash? Who, his voice caught slightly, who became exactly who she was supposed to be, despite every expectation I placed on her. Clara felt tears burn. Father, I'm not asking for forgiveness, Edward said quietly. I'm offering recognition. You were right, Clara, about sacrifice, about family, about building a life on your own terms instead of managing everyone else's. He met her eyes. I'm proud of you. Should have said it years ago. Clara raised her glass with shaking hands. Thank you. They drank. Marion was crying quietly. Julian squeezed Clara's hand under the table. Mrs. Bramwell looked satisfied, like she'd orchestrated this whole thing, which she probably had. After dinner, as guests were leaving, Marion approached Clara carefully. Could we talk? She asked. Briefly, professional matter. They stepped outside into the cool autumn evening. Marion pulled out a folder, handed it over. Policy proposal, she explained. Rural education funding reform at the national level. I'm using my inheritance, the half I still have, to fund lobbying efforts. But I wanted your input on the practical aspects before I submit it. Clara opened the folder, read quickly. It was good. Really good. Comprehensive reform that would sustain programs like hers across the country. This is impressive, she admitted. If it passes, Marion, this could change everything. If it passes, what you built becomes the model instead of the exception. Marion's voice was careful. I'm not doing this for forgiveness or to make up for the fire. I'm doing it because you were right. I needed to build something instead of just surviving my own guilt. Then let me help, Clara heard herself say. Professional consultation. I'll review the proposal, suggest practical amendments, maybe testify when it goes to committee. Marion looked stunned. You do that? For the work, yes. Not for us. For the children this could help. Clara handed back the folder. Revise based on my notes. We'll meet quarterly to track progress. Professional boundaries maintained. Professional boundaries, Marion echoed. Then quietly, are we always going to be this formal with each other? Clara thought about it. About the sister she'd had and the stranger Marion had become. About the work that mattered more than family comfort. Probably, she said honestly. We destroyed who we were to each other, Marion. We can build something new, something professional, something sustainable. But it won't be sisterhood. Not the way we knew it. I can live with that. So can I. They shook hands, formal, distant, honest, and went back inside to rejoin the celebration. 3 years later, Clara stood in Parliament watching Marion present her education reform bill. It had taken years of lobbying, revision, political maneuvering. But here it was, comprehensive rural education funding modeled on the Ashford Trust system, poised to pass. Julian sat beside her in the gallery. They'd married 2 years ago in a quiet ceremony in Ashford, witnessed by Mrs. Bramwell and Thomas and Sarah Wickham. No grand celebration, no Halston family politics, just choice. Clara wore a simple band on her finger now, reminder that she'd learned to be with someone without sacrificing herself. Learned to let Julian love her without managing his happiness. Learned to just be, imperfect, complicated, human. Marion's bill passed with overwhelming support. Clara watched her sister accept congratulations from politicians and reformers, saw the genuine pride in Marion's face, and felt something like peace. They'd never be sisters again. Not really. But they'd both built lives that mattered. Separate lives, distinct paths, occasionally intersecting for the work. It was enough. After the vote, Marion found Clara in the hallway outside the chamber. They looked at each other, colleagues, former sisters, two women who'd destroyed everything to find out who they actually were. "Thank you," Marion said, "for the consultation, the testimony. This wouldn't have passed without your input. It was good work, worth supporting." Clara hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you, Marion, for building this, for becoming someone beyond the fragile girl who needed saving." Marion's eyes filled. "I'm proud of you too, for everything you built, for surviving what I did to you and building something better anyway." "We both survived," Clara said quietly. "Just separately. Is that enough?" Clara thought about her life now. The 7 schools operating across 4 counties. The hundreds of children educated, the policy reform that would reach thousands more. Julian beside her, solid and real. The work she'd chosen instead of sacrificed for. "Yes," she said. "It's enough." They parted ways in the Parliament hallway, Marion to celebrate with her policy colleagues, Clara to return to Ashford with Julian, to the life she'd built from ash and choice and hard-won freedom. On the train home, Julian asked the question he'd been holding. "Do you miss her?" "Marion, the sister you had before everything fell apart?" Clara looked out at the countryside rushing past, thought about the girl she'd been, the one who sacrificed, who managed, who gave away the man she loved to save her sister. "No," she said honestly. "I miss who I thought I was when I had her, the noble one, the good daughter, but I don't miss the sacrifice, don't miss the martyrdom." She turned to Julian. "I like who I became instead, harder, more honest, someone who chooses instead of surrenders. Even though it cost you Marion?" "Especially because it cost me Marion." Clara took his hand. "I gave up a relationship built on sacrifice and sickness. I gained myself. That trade was worth making." Julian kissed her hand. "I love you. Flawed, complicated, occasionally terrifying you. I love you too. Patient, steady, willing to wait while I figured myself out you." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they reached Ashford, the village was preparing for the Autumn Festival, celebrating 5 years since the Trust's founding, 3 years since the fire and rebuild. Children Clara had taught 5 years ago were now teenagers, some preparing for university, others taking apprenticeships, all of them literate and capable. Emma, the girl who'd thanked Clara on opening day, found her in the crowd. "Miss Halston, I got accepted to Teachers College." The girl was nearly as tall as Clara now, bright with potential. "I'm going to study education, come back and teach here. Build more schools like you did." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Emma, that's wonderful. It's because of you. Because you didn't give up, even after the fire." Emma hugged her impulsively. "Thank you for fighting for us." The girl ran off to celebrate with friends. Clara stood watching, feeling the full weight of what she'd built. Not just schools, not just policy reform. Futures. Dozens of them, hundreds eventually, stretching out beyond what she could see or control. Julian wrapped his arms around her from behind. Legacy. Terrifying legacy. Clara leaned into him. "What if I failed them somehow? What if the schools close or the funding fails or what if they build something even better than what you started? Julian turned her around. Clara, you can't control their futures. You can only create opportunities. Let them choose what to do with it. When did I teach you that? You've been teaching me for 3 years about choice, about letting go, about building instead of controlling. He kissed her softly. Now maybe it's time you learned it yourself. Clara looked around the festival, at the children and families and future she'd helped create, at Mrs. Bramwell organizing the chaos with familiar efficiency, at Thomas and Sarah comparing notes on student progress, at the school standing solid and permanent against the autumn sky. This was what choosing looked like, what sacrifice became when it transformed into work, into impact, into something that lasted beyond the woman who'd built it. She'd given up Marion, given up martyrdom, given up the comfortable fiction that sacrifice was the same as love, and gained everything. A life built on choice instead of obligation, work that mattered, partnership that didn't require sacrifice, the freedom to be imperfect, complicated, human. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything she'd been too afraid to choose 3 years ago. Julian took her hand. Come on. Mrs. Bramwell made her special cake. If we don't get there soon, the children will eat it all. They walked toward the celebration together, equal, choosing, free. And Clara thought about the diamond ring that had started everything, hitting the porcelain that morning 3 years ago. Thought about Marion's voice saying, "He loves me now." Thought about walking out of Halston House into the cold, leaving behind status and love and the illusion that sacrifice fixed anything. She'd lost everything that morning and found herself instead. The festival lasted until dark. Lanterns were lit, music played, children danced and laughed and demonstrated the future Clara had fought for. She stood at the edge of it all, watching, feeling the weight of work completed and work just beginning. Marion would never see this, would never stand in an Ashford festival celebrating what her money had helped build. The distance between them was permanent now, professional partnership without personal connection. And Clara found she could live with that. Some relationships weren't meant to survive honesty. Some love required sacrifice that destroyed both people. And some choices, hard, cruel, necessary choices, were worth making even when they cost everything familiar. You're smiling, Julian observed. Am I? You are. What are you thinking about? Clara looked at her husband, the man she'd given away and reclaimed and learned to love without sacrificing, and told him the truth. I'm thinking that 3 years ago, I broke my life apart to learn how to choose. And standing here now, watching what I built from that wreckage, she gestured at the festival, the school, the futures blooming around them. I'd make the same choice again, every time. Even knowing what it would cost? Especially knowing what it would cost. Clara took his hand. Because the cost was who I was pretending to be, and the gain was who I actually am. Julian pulled her into the dance, and Clara let herself be held, not saved, not managed, not sacrificed for. Just held by someone who loved her, flaws and all, and was willing to let her be exactly who she'd fought to become. The music played. The lanterns glowed. Children who wouldn't grow up limited by illiteracy laughed and planned futures their parents had never imagined. And Clara Halston, no longer the sacrificing sister, no longer the noble martyr, just herself, complicated and choosing and free, danced under the autumn stars and felt finally completely at peace. She'd burned everything down to find out who she was without the sacrifice. Turned out she was someone worth knowing, someone who built instead of surrendered, who chose instead of martyred, who loved without destroying herself in the process. It had taken 3 years, a burned school, a severed family, and more hard choices than she could count. But standing here now, in the life she'd built on her own terms, it was worth it. Every impossible, painful, necessary choice. Worth it.